Martial Peak, Chapter 5903, Besieging the enemy's stronghold in order to attack their reinforcements. Sensing this powerful yet familiar aura, Mo Na-yi was first overjoyed, but was immediately taken aback. What made him happy was that Yang Kai had finally appeared. He had been hiding in the shadows all this time and hadn't done anything at all, so contrary to what might seem reasonable, his absence put a great deal of pressure on the Black Ink clan. If he made a move, the Black Ink clan could respond appropriately, so, when he noticed Yang Kai's aura, Mo Na-yi was finally relieved. What surprised him was that the target Yang Kai had chosen this time was actually Mou, a veteran royal lord. Yang Kai had made several moves throughout several battles, but each time he did so, his target had always been the pseudo-royal lords. Due to his unpredictable means and the eerie Grand Dao River, the pseudo-royal lords he targeted rarely escaped, unless Dia Luo managed to come to their rescue in time. It could be said that half the pseudo-royal lords who had fallen on the battlefield over the past 10 years had died directly or indirectly because of Yang Kai. He had almost single-handedly killed so many pseudo-royal lords to the point they were unable to lift their heads. Yet in all that time, Yang Kai had never taken the initiative to attack a true royal lord before, least of all Mou as the most experienced royal lord in the Black Ink clan. The corners of Mo Na-yi's brow immediately twitched as he felt that Yang Kai had gone crazy to make such a crazy move. He thus immediately shouted, "Dia Luo." There was no verbal response, but the moment Yang Kai appeared, Dia Luo led a dozen pseudo-royal lords towards him at astonishing speed. Dia Luo had already become quite familiar with rushing to the rescue. In every battle, he would lead a dozen pseudo-royal lords to pin down Yang Kai, so there was no need for Mo Na-yi to give him any detailed instructions. On the other side, Mou was obviously taken aback by the sudden ambush. Just now, he had been fighting Luo Tinghe alone. This was the third Ninth Order master he had fought in the past 10 years. Unlike Xiang Shan's relentless onslaught or Wei Junyang's boldness, Enyang Cave Heaven's Luo Tinghe's attacking style was more calculated and meticulous. She would execute exquisite secret techniques in a seemingly endlessly chain, making her like a never-ending storm, leaving Mou extremely frustrated. Even though his foundation was better than Luo Tinghe's, it was difficult for him to gain the upper hand. From the beginning of their fight until now, they were evenly matched. A royal lord's senses were extremely sharp, so even if Yang Kai had used Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability, it was difficult for the latter to completely hide his traces. Pseudo-royal lords might not be able to guard against Yang Kai's sneak attack, but Mou could. In fact, Mou already had a vague premonition before Yang Kai even launched his attack, therefore, he was only shocked for a moment when Yang Kai appeared and instantly reacted appropriately. He promptly collected the copious amount of Black Ink strength around him and created a shield to defend himself. Right then, Luo Tinghe's attack struck the barrier, but it only caused his body to violently sway and was unable to cause any damage. Yang Kai's space-time river swept in just at that moment, gushing straight from above and engulfing him. Mou used the tried and tested strategy of fighting back with everything he had, bombarding Yang Kai's Dao Strength River with everything he had in an attempt to force him back. The raging waves crashed against Mou's barrage again and again, while the Dao strengths fluctuated non-stop. At the same time, Luo Tinghe unleashed her strength. The combined assault of two Ninth Order masters proved too much, however, and quickly caused Mou to sink into the space-time river. The undercurrents inside the river instantly started surging. Surprisingly, it was Mou who was using his own strength to stir up trouble and bombard Yang Kai's Dao strengths. The best way to deal with this situation was naturally for Yang Kai to enter the space-time river and use the environment to his advantage to engage in a fierce battle with Mou. With his current strength, it wouldn't be difficult for him to kill the trapped Mou. But he didn't do this. If he wanted to kill a royal lord, he would have already done so 10 years ago, but killing a royal lord would not have done any good to the overall situation. The key masters in the Black Ink clan right now were still the pseudo-royal lords. They're here. Yang Kai completely ignored the turmoil of his Dao strengths and lightly shouted. Leave them to me. Luo Ting, he replied as she gently pointed her finger towards the void. The next moment, Yin-Yang Dao strength rapidly filled the surroundings before an enormous Yin-Yang fish manifested, enveloping Dia Luo and the dozen pseudo-royal lords who were rushing over to help Mou. The Yin-Yang fish slowly started rotating, like it had a life of its own. Immediately, an inexplicable pull appeared in the void, causing the group of Black Ink clan powerhouses to lose their footing. Dia Luo and the other Black Ink clan powerhouses immediately launched numerous secret techniques together, trying to break free from this inexplicable force. But before they could escape, Yang Kai was already upon them. No one saw how he moved, but when he appeared behind a pseudo-royal lord with his azure dragon spear, the latter didn't even notice. Thrusting the spear with one hand, and executing a palm strike with the other, Yang Kai mercilessly attacked the pseudo-royal lord. Immediately, an inexplicable burst of energy appeared in the void, as if something had been cut off. How could the pseudo-royal lords be their opponents under these circumstances? Their auras vanished one after another, though the counterattacks of these pseudo-royal lords before their deaths could not be scoffed at. Knowing that they were doomed to die, each pseudo-royal lord displayed suicidal determination in their final moments, causing both Yang Kai and Luo Tinghe to suffer some injuries. In particular, Yang Kai's Dao strengths were fluctuating in a wild manner, not because he was using his own Dao strengths to kill his enemies, but because the space-time river was under attack. After dealing with all the pseudo-royal lords, Yang Kai shouted, "I'll leave him to you." A moment after he shouted, a figure rushed out from the space-time river. It was none other than Mou, who had been swallowed by the space-time river earlier. Although he had been trapped inside, Mou had not suffered any physical injuries. His aura, on the other hand, was a little weaker than before, though this did not affect his combat strength much. When Mou saw the tragic sight before him, a cold and frigid look took over his face, but before he could do anything, Luo Tinghe rushed him and the two resumed their original battle. Yang Kai, on the other hand, didn't even spare Mou a glance. He raised his hand towards the space-time river, grabbing it like it was a whip, then used instantaneous movement, disappearing into the void. He didn't attack Mou with Luo Tinghe. Unless Yang Kai exposed his true strength, it wouldn't be easy to kill a veteran royal lord. Furthermore, it was more convenient to sneak attack the pseudo-royal lords than to kill a tough nut like Mou. At the no-return pass, Mo Na Ye's face turned ashen. He had never expected that his strategy against Yang Kai would be broken so easily. Yang Kai sneak attacked Mou, but clearly he never had any intention of fighting him. His true goal was the pseudo-royal lords led by Dia Luo. These were the stumbling blocks that had been pestering Yang Kai all this time, making it difficult for him to display his full strength. With a simple move of besieging the enemy's stronghold in order to attack their reinforcements, everyone in Dia Luo's team, apart from Dia Luo himself who had managed to escape, had been slaughtered by Yang Kai and Luo Tinghe. The situation has changed. Mo Na Ye could keenly sense this. Yang Kai had never done something like this before. The team of pseudo-royal lords led by Dia Luo had successfully managed to restrain Yang Kai in the previous battles, hindering him from displaying his full strength, but by the looks of it, Yang Kai had always had the ability to break free of Dia Luo and the pseudo-royal lord's restraint. It was just that he did not want to, that was all. What the hell made him reveal his fangs today? Sir. Dia Luo, who had fled back to the no-return pass, arrived in front of Mo Na Ye, his face filled with shame. He didn't dare to face Yang Kai alone, so he didn't know what to do now. Xiang Shan had already rushed over, but Yang Kai was still nowhere to be seen. This caused his heart to sink. Despite culling so many 8th Order masters, he found it difficult to feel happy about this situation. Instead, he was starting to feel worse and worse. Under normal circumstances, Yang Kai should have come out to stop them, but now he seemed happy to continue showing off his strength even if it meant continuing this exchange of lives, which was undoubtedly a worrying issue. As expected, Yang Kai's aura appeared on another side of the battlefield, followed by 3 pseudo-royal lords' auras extinguishing. Has it come to this? Mo Na Ye's heart ran cold. He was even beginning to wonder whether the humans had sensed something. But, if not, how could Yang Kai have made this choice? How could they have possibly noticed? This makes no sense at all. In the void, Yang Kai pursed his lips, his body constantly flickering, cutting through one battlefield after another. When his space-time river came out, one by one the pseudo-royal lords fell, freeing up one Ninth Order master after another, without daring to delay for even a heartbeat. In such a situation, various Eighth Order masters would fall for every breath that passed. The only way to stop Mo Na Yi was to free up more Ninth Order masters so that they could go forth and contain the group of enemy masters led by Mo Na Yi. Of course, Yang Kai could have taken on the task himself, but without revealing his true strength, using Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to launch sneak attacks from the shadows was simply more efficient. Yang Kai could clearly feel the fall of the Eighth Order masters. Each one of them was a rare talent of the human race, and each of them had gone through at least thousands of years of cultivation to reach such heights, but on this cruel battlefield, their fall would become nothing more than a cold statistic in the records of history. Has Mo Na Yi noticed something? Otherwise, why would he have joined the battlefield himself? Before the battle, Yang Kai and Mi Jingluan had expected great losses on their side, but seeing it happen with their own eyes still left their hearts bleeding. Yang Kai tried his best to suppress the urge to stop Mo Na Yi and turned all his resentment and pent-up displeasure into powerful attacks, unleashing them from the spear in his hand. Kill. I need to kill more. Kill them all. Mo Na Yi went on, there's something that I can't understand, so I will appreciate it if Supreme Commander Mi can explain it to me. On the battlefield, Yang Kai's aura was constantly appearing and disappearing, and every time that happened, a number of pseudo-royal lords would face unfortunate ends. Mo Na Ye's team was restrained, yet Yang Kai could freely go on a slaughter spree. From the human's perspective, stalling for some time seemed to be a good idea. That way, Yang Kai could better weaken the Black Ink clan's side, thus, Mi Jingluan obliged, so there exists something that puzzles you in this world? These words were not just meant to ridicule. As the supreme commanders of their respective sides, the fight between Mi Jingluan and Mo Na Yi was not just something that played out over the past year or two. Both of them had a thorough understanding of each other. Putting aside where they stand and seeing him merely as an opponent, Mi Jingluan thought highly of Mo Na Yi in that regard. Mo Na Yi did not answer his question. Instead, he asked what he had on his mind. How did you find out? Find what out? Mi Jingluan answered casually while putting on a confused look at the right moment. Mo Na Yi kept a firm gaze on him. Even though you are able to conceal it well, Supreme Commander Mi, Brother Yang here is not as good at pretending, so why ask me that question when you already know the answer? Next to them, Yang bristled. What did I do? If you want to talk, just talk, why drag me into it? Yang was displeased. Mo Na Yi turned to look at him. Your expression changed when I was asking my question earlier. That proves you know what I'm talking about. Am I not allowed to be nervous during such a critical moment? Yang roared. Mo Na Yi could not be bothered to answer, so he turned back to Mi Jingluan. Over the years, the human race's attacks on the no-return pass have maintained the same frequency, but this time, your attack happened far before the expected time. Moreover, Brother Yang has ignored us so openly. He could have saved those Eighth Order masters, yet he continued culling our pseudo-royal lords instead. Even though you can clearly achieve the same goal with minimal cost if you had spent a dozen years more, you chose the risky method instead. It's as if you're all in a hurry to reclaim the no-return pass. Meanwhile, everything that was said was just flying over the heads of Dia Luo and the many pseudo-royal lords. None of them had any idea what Mo Nai was talking about. All they knew was that things were likely to be disastrous this time. The Black Ink clan had 2 royal lords and a dozen pseudo-royal lords in this group, but the humans had 8 ninth-order masters. In terms of true strength, the Black Ink clan was at a complete disadvantage. They were curious to know the answer to Mi Jing Luan's earlier question. Why didn't they run away when they could have? As a result, they were now surrounded in this place. Each one of them was feeling uneasy about this situation, and it was inevitable that a sense of dissatisfaction arose against Mo Nai. Why is that? Mo Nai spoke, but he did not mean it as a question. He answered, there's only one possibility, and it is that you humans have found out about it. That's why, you're in a hurry to end the battle at the no-return pass, and you'd rather pay a heavy price now to make that happen. Am I right, Supreme Commander Mi? Mi Jing Luan shook his head. I don't know what you're talking about. Mo Nai sighed, so be it. If Supreme Commander Mi does not wish to answer, then I will refrain from asking. This should be the deciding battle, right? I admit this came as quite a surprise, and our side is not prepared yet, but it seems you are not either. Heh, who would have thought that this battle would end up this way? But Supreme Commander Mi, even though my Black Ink clan is in decline right now, claiming the no-return pass won't be that easy. I hope that the losses incurred on your side are within your comfort zone at the end of this battle. Oh, Yang Lai was impatient. What are you blabbering on for? Your funeral is already here, Mo Nai. Mo Nai turned to him with an icy look in his eyes. The casual look from before was gone, and he spoke in a stern voice. Are you really so sure that you've defeated me? Almost at the same time as those words were spoken, dozens of powerful auras that shook the void rose up within the no-return pass and swept out. It was the pseudo-royal lords who had remained in the no-return pass all this while, guarding the high-rank Black Ink nests. These pseudo-royal lords had been stationed in the no-return pass since the humans began attacking it, but there was no helping it. It was mainly because they had to guard against the annoying Yang Kai. This fiend was constantly appearing out of nowhere, always coming out of the barren territory every battle. Without these pseudo-royal lords to protect the Black Ink nests, Yang Kai would long have destroyed them all, and without them, the Black Ink clan will have no way to replenish their forces or heal from their injuries. And, during Yang Kai's repeated fights with the pseudo-royal lord team led by Dia Luo, it was they who fended against the fallout from their battle to keep the high-rank Black Ink nests safe. These pseudo-royal lords had never left the no-return pass since the humans began their attack. However, all of them had left at this moment without a single one remaining behind. Without their protection, the no-return pass was practically defenseless at this moment. Even though there were still 2 Black Ink giant spirit gods standing on either side of the no-return pass, if Yang Kai had wanted to, he could easily take advantage of this opportunity to charge in and destroy all the Black Ink nests. If the 2 Black Ink giant spirit gods were to attack him at that point, it would only speed up the destruction of the Black Ink nests. Noticing the unusual movement from the no-return pass, the Ninth Order masters all looked astonished. Mo Nai grinned at Mi Jing Luan. Since it's the final battle, I won't be standing on ceremony. The humans were willing to pay a huge price if it meant taking the no-return pass, so how could the Black Ink clan hold back? If this battle was lost, would there still be any Black Ink nests left? In such a situation, there was no longer any need to guard the no-return pass. In a fight with their lives on the line, the winner would be the king, and the loser would be the villain. Kill! Mo Nai suddenly shouted as he led his team towards Wei Junyang, which caught the latter off guard. Even with the other Ninth Order masters responding promptly, he was still immediately forced back. Like Xiaofan, Wei Junyang was also wounded and was obviously seen as a breakthrough point by Mo Nai, which made him very angry. But fortunately, the Ninth Order masters were all top masters and soon stabilized the situation. As Mi Jingluan's divine sense surged, 3 of the 8 Ninth Order Masters left to confront the pseudo-royal lords who had come charging out of the no-return pass, while the remaining 5 teamed up to fight Mo Nai and his team in an evenly matched situation. However, how could 3 Ninth Order Masters stop the charge of several dozen pseudo-royal lords? The pseudo-royal lords have formed their own battle formations, and a single 3 Fortunes formation was enough to hold back a single Ninth Order Master. In an instant, the advantage gained from Yang Kai killing off a large number of pseudo-royal lords was leveled, and the damage which the humans were able to stem began to snowball. Martial Peak, Chapter 5906, Great Sun Explosion. Puryong Pass was the only great pass of the human race left. It was currently the command center of their grand army. Its symbolic and strategic significance was greater than its role as a weapon. Other than the first battle for the no-return pass, where the majestic, impregnable Great Pass battled the Black Ink clan army, it had always stayed outside of the battlefield during the fights happening over the years. It wasn't until now that the Great Pass rushed over and the lights coming from its various artifacts were released, bombarding indiscriminately into the Black Ink clan's defense line. Its fierce and unceasing attack quickly tore a gap into the defense line, and the Azure Sun army nearby immediately took advantage of the situation to charge in. The masters from the Black Ink clan quickly noticed the situation, and immediately, more than a dozen pseudo-royal lords rushed over. At the same time, over 100 figures flew out from Puryong Pass to meet them. These were the 8th Order Masters who were responsible for standing by on Puryong Pass and maintaining it all this while. 100 8th Order Masters definitely would not be able to stop this number of pseudo-royal lords alone, but they had Puryong Pass behind them to act as reliable support. Holding back and delaying their enemies was still something they could manage. The exchange between both sides soon began, and the light of both the secret techniques and artifacts blossomed incessantly. On one side of the huge battlefield, the front the Burning Moon army was in charge of, both sides were constantly exchanging blows. However, the Burning Moon army were unable to break through the tight defense line of their opponent from beginning to end, so it did not matter how intense the fight became. Only by ripping a gap in that tight line of defense could the humans gain some ground and charge in and slaughter more of their enemy. In the fierce exchange, the Black Ink clan managed to repel the attacking humans time and time again, and both sides were suffering great casualties. At a certain point, the Black Ink clan on this front suddenly noticed that the human race's attack had inexplicably become much weaker, and while they were confused, they saw the dense forces of the human race army suddenly split up, moving to the left and right, while a dozen warships that were clearly different from the usual ones came forward. Moreover, there was a giant warship following right behind them. A purifying Black Ink battleship. The masters from the Black Ink clan on this front instantly recognized the warship as one of the purifying Black Ink battleships created by the humans. Their eyes showed puzzlement at this move, as they had never seen a purifying Black Ink battleship on the front lines of a battlefield in all the times they battled each other. After all, this warship itself was not meant for charging into battles, it was a support craft used as a fallback point. What was the purpose of the humans bringing in this purifying Black Ink battleship? The next moment, those from the Black Ink clan seemed to have thought of something, and a look of great horror emerged on their faces. Divine sense surging, as someone roared, "Don't let them get close. Sink them." A heavy barrage of attacks that covered the sky rained down on the warships, and even though the defensive arrays of the dozen warships in front of the purifying Black Ink battleship were activated to their limits, they were still destroyed in a very short time, with the warships being blasted to pieces as well, alongside the members of their squads. Even more attacks came towards the purifying Black Ink battleship. The defensive arrays glowed brightly, but it quickly dimmed down and was shattered. In the next moment, the massive purifying Black Ink battleship was also completely destroyed. The humans had many purifying Black Ink battleships in their arsenal, with each division having at least one of its own. The total number of such warships they had with purifying light sealed in them had already exceeded 1,000. The Black Ink clan's defense was indeed solid. Even if the humans could break through it with a forceful attack, they would still have to pay a heavy price. But with the purifying Black Ink battleships leading the way, the casualties incurred by the humans could be greatly reduced. The soldiers were gone if they died, but they could produce more purifying Black Ink battleships if they were destroyed. There was no way Mi Jingluan couldn't recognize such a simple thing. This was a tactic that he had thought of long ago, but he would not use it simply before his hand was forced. Building 1,000 purifying Black Ink battleships was not exactly an easy task. However, if they wanted to launch an attack on the no-return pass when they had not made full preparations, this was the only method they could employ. Over 1,000 purifying Black Ink battleships exploded in less than a half cup of tea's time, each one purifying a vast area. No matter how strong the Black Ink clan's defenses were, they were helpless against this power that perfectly restrained them. The once tight defense line was now filled with wide gaps, and the various armies of the humans, who had long been preparing for this moment, rushed forward at the opportune moment. They fortified their positions, increased their troops, expanded their advantage, and slaughtered their enemies. In less than half an hour, the Black Ink clan was in clear decline. It was practically a miracle that they were able to achieve such immense results in such a vast battlefield, and within only a short time, but time was running out for the humans now. The explosion of such a large number of purifying Black Ink battleships meant that the humans can no longer rely on the purifying light sealed within those battleships to disperse Black Ink strength that invaded their bodies. Now, the soldiers could only rely on the purifying Black Ink pills they brought in advance to protect their small universes. But the purifying Black Ink pills had limited medicinal efficacies, so this battle had to be fought and won quickly. Many factors could affect the outcome in war, including the determination of the soldiers on both sides and the strength of their forces. However, the most significant determining factor was still the top masters of both sides, the giant spirit gods and Black Ink giant spirit gods. Even if the humans could wipe out the Black Ink clan army entirely, it would be useless if they could not take down the Black Ink giant spirit gods. A creation of Mo was a threat to the humans that the pseudo-royal lords could not compare with. Yang Kai continued his endless slaughter on the battlefield, his figure swift and elusive. Everywhere he passed, the auras of pseudo-royal lords vanished. Since the start of the battle, as many as 30 pseudo-royal lords had already died at his hands. This was the battle where he killed the most pseudo-royal lords. The high-intensity battle left his body covered in blood and his aura unstable. The final struggle made by the pseudo-royal lords before their deaths was not something that could be ignored. However, his efforts were able to reduce the casualties for his people by a great margin. Mo Na-yi burned all bridges when he realized that this was going to be the final, decisive fight, commanding all the pseudo-royal lords standing by at the no-return pass to come out as well, completely giving up on defending the no-return pass. Despite how many Eighth Order masters the humans had, they were still somewhat powerless when faced with these groups of pseudo-royal lords in battle formations. Many Eighth Order masters suffered miserable fates under their hands. However, as Yang Kai continued to slaughter the pseudo-royal lords, the situation finally took a turn for the better. At this moment, the Eighth Order masters also gradually stabilized their positions, got into their own battle formations, divided their opponents, and clashed with the pseudo-royal lords. And with Yang Kai continuing his hunt, the humans could slowly gain an advantage when it came to top combat power. However, Yang Kai was not satisfied because the two Black Ink giant spirit gods had not made a single move from beginning to end. They were still just guarding the no-return pass. If the Black Ink giant spirit gods did not make a move, Yang Kai did not dare to reveal his true strength either. If they continued fighting like this, their casualties would continue to increase, and even if they captured the no-return pass in the end, it would be difficult to make the cost of the fallen masters worth it. Fortunately, After the total collapse of the Black Ink clan's defense line and further expansion of casualties, the two Black Ink giant spirit gods who had been standing by finally could not sit still any longer. A deep sigh seemed to come from the void, causing every living being on the battlefield to tremble. Immediately afterwards, the two enormous creatures guarding the left and right sides of the no-return pass moved. They each arrived at the forefront of the battlefield with just a single step, and with a casual wave of their hands, both humans and Black Ink clansmen were silently reduced to paste. It was not that they didn't want to avoid Black Ink clan members, but their bodies were simply too large. Once they launched their attacks, the area it passed through was too wide to achieve precise control. In an instant, both the human race and Black Ink clan armies scattered wherever the two Black Ink giant spirit gods went. At the same time, in the barren territory, Ada and Aer, who had been paying attention to the situation here, became excited. Ada pointed to the territory gate. "Do we go now?" Aer stood up and quickly nodded. Before leaving, their little friend had told them that if those two big guys dared to move, they should rush in. Previously, those two big guys had been remaining motionless, so Ada and Aer could only stare at them. Now, it was undoubtedly time for them to descend the mountain. Beat them up. Ada's face was full of killing intent. After his declaration, he took a deep breath and suddenly shrunk his towering and massive body, transforming into a small giant. Next to him, Aer did the same. Within 10 breaths of the two Black Ink giant spirit gods taking action, the two giant spirit gods stepped out of the territory gate connecting the barren territory and the Black Ink battlefield. Marshall Peak, Chapter 5907, Chance. After the giant spirit gods, shrunken to the size of small giants, stepped out of the territory gate, their body expanded rapidly back to their original size. Then, they charged and crashed thunderously into the no-return pass. The massive remnant great passes shook and the aftershocks swept out in all directions. The Black Ink nests, which the Black Ink clan had been carefully tending to all these years, instantly shattered into dust. If this scene had occurred a few days ago, it would have undoubtedly been a great heartache to the Black Ink clan, but at this moment, none of them had the heart to care about such things anymore. The Black Ink clan had brought out all their strength and the entire no-return pass had become an empty shell. This battle was the one to decide the life or death of the Black Ink clan in the no-return pass. If they won, they could continue to survive, but if they lost, everything would end for them, so who would still care about the Black Ink nests? The two giant spirit gods raised their feet and started running through the no-return pass. However, it only took 2 or 3 steps before they reached the battlefield where they flew straight towards the two Black Ink giant spirit gods. The Black Ink clan army that tried to stop them suffered catastrophic losses, and the defense line that they were able to maintain through grueling effort was smashed apart by Ada and Aer, creating 2 unimpeded passageways right to the heart of their lines. Countless casualties occurred in an instant. The Black Ink giant spirit gods, who were in the midst of mercilessly slaughtering the humans, naturally noticed the situation. They immediately assumed defensive positions, but in the next moment, they were each hit squarely by Ada and Aer and tumbled over with them. Ada tackled his opponent's waist and swung his fist fiercely. His opponent was also unwilling to appear weak and smashed down with his elbow, fiercely hammering Ada's back. He even grabbed Ada's neck with his other arm and squeezed tight as if he were trying to twist Ada's head off. The battle between the two giant spirit gods was extremely simple and crude, making it look almost like 2 children fighting, but every one of their strikes caused space to shake and become unstable. Terrifying shockwaves that were visible to the naked eye rippled out in all directions. All living beings nearby, regardless of whether they were human or Black Ink clan, ran and cleared a space large enough for these behemoths to fight. Even though Aer's side was not as explosive, it was still extremely rough. He and his opponent exchanged punches, each first reaching the other's body, causing both sides to stumble. These two were old rivals who had fought for thousands of years in the barren territory, but neither had ever defeated the other. This battle was simply a continuation of their previous struggle. If nothing out of the ordinary happened, it was unlikely that there would be a clear winner in the fights between the giant spirit gods. The masters from either side could not interfere with a fight of this level. More than that, simply being caught in between these four would have dire consequences. Only Yang Kai waited in the shadows as he watched on from the sidelines, waiting for the right moment to strike. The black ink giant spirit gods were finally moving, something which he had been eagerly anticipating. Ada and Aer also arrived promptly to restrain them, so there was no need to worry about them posing a threat to the human race army. Now, all Yang Kai had to do was look for a suitable opportunity to strike. However, when this opportunity would rear its head, or if it would even arise to begin with, was uncertain. Even though Yang Kai had carefully instructed Ada and Aer beforehand, giant spirit gods were simple-minded, so there was no guarantee they would do as they were asked. Rather than getting between the giant spirit gods' fight, Yang Kai continued to roam the battlefield while keeping an eye on them. With Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability, the pseudo-royal lords could hardly even sense his presence before he launched an attack on them. By the time they did notice, danger was already upon their heads. After reaching this point in the battle, Yang Kai was not content to just kill pseudo-royal lords. If the opportunity presented itself, territory lords were not spared either. Several dozen pseudo-royal lords had died at his hand, and there were likely more than 1,000 territory lords dead even as a conservative estimate, and that was because they were killed merely out of convenience. Yang Kai hadn't deliberately targeted them. Thanks to the gap in the defenses created by Ada and Aer's charge, the Wolf Fang army and Twin Instrument army had already breached the Black Ink clan's main forces. The two human armies cooperated smoothly as they constantly expanded the gap in the defense line. Although the Black Ink clan tried their best to retreat and regroup, they were unable to do so. Victory seemed to be within grasping range for the human race. In this chaotic and brutal battlefield, despite the constant reaping of lives, the soldiers did not stop throwing themselves in. To Yang Kai's surprise, the opportunity he was waiting for came quickly. From the battlefield, a roar suddenly erupted. It was Ada's shout mixed with a hint of excitement, "Little friend, come quick, I've got him." Almost at the same time he shouted these words, Yang Kai, who had been keeping an eye on their movements, had already arrived at Ada's side. At this moment, Ada had managed to pin his opponent in the void. Ada's arms had constricted one of his opponent's arms, stopping it from moving. His legs were also like ropes, wrapped around one of his opponent's thighs. In all these years of war, Yang Kai had never used these Eighth-Order ones, and that was because they were the trump card he was saving to use against the Black Ink giant spirit god. He could not easily reveal them. Now, at this moment, that trump card was finally going to be played. As many as 2,000 Eighth-Order small stone race masters suddenly appeared on the battlefield, which shocked all those who were fighting here. All eyes were instantly fixed on this side, and when they realized that the source of the surging aura was from this small stone race army, the human race masters breathed a sigh of relief while those from the Black Ink clan began panicking. Especially Mo Nai, who instantly understood Yang Kai's intentions. His pupils shrank in shock. A sharp aura suddenly struck him and left a bone-deep injury on his body. Mi Jing Luan lightly waved the feather fan in his hand as Dao's strength surged, instantly engulfing his opponent in his attack. "You still have the heart to be distracted at such a critical moment? That's not a good habit to have." Mo Nai gritted his teeth while defending against Mi Jing Luan's attack. Has he been hiding his trump card just for this very moment? Who knows? Mi Jing Luan gave a casual reply, but his attacks grew more and more aggressive. Normally, Mo Nai wouldn't suffer much against such attacks, but his mind was distracted at the moment, so his body became covered in wounds in just a short while. Mo Na thought at first that even if they lost this fight and subsequently the no-return pass, they would still be able to deal a heavy blow to the humans. After all, the Supreme One's soul clones were so powerful that no one could oppose them. Worst comes to worst, they would disappear into the depths of the void and meet up with the reinforcements that were rushing this way, then they would still be able to stop the human race army. Martial Peak, Chapter 5908, Sacrifice the Tail to Survive. However, when a large number of 8th Order small stone race masters appeared, Mo Na was shaken. He had no idea whether or not the Supreme One's soul clone would still be able to protect itself in the face of such a tactic. Unfortunately, he could not afford to think more about the situation at this moment as he had already fallen completely into a disadvantage in his fight against Mi Jingluan. It would be disastrous if he were to allow himself to get distracted any further, so he had no choice but to push down his worries and focus on the battle at hand. On the other side, more than 2,000 8th Order small stone race masters pounced on the black ink giant spirit god on Yang Kai's command. Though they had large, stalwart bodies, all of them were still as tiny as ants compared to the black ink giant spirit god. This scene was just like a colony of ants attacking an elephant. Each scrambled up onto every part of the black ink giant spirit god's body and clung on tight with their hands and legs. Yang Kai stretched out both hands and the great sun and moon marks glowed with an unprecedentedly dazzling light. As he clenched his fists, he roared, "Explode!" Under the influence of the great sun and moon marks, all of them small stone race masters exploded into yellow and blue lights, which seemed to gush out from within their bodies, leaving behind an extraordinarily rich and pure yin and yang element power. Each point of light was like a droplet of water collecting into a giant pool, turning into a halo that melted into and connected with each other to envelope a vast space. In just 3 short breaths, the yellow and blue lights melted away, replaced by a pure white light. The white light was not too dazzling at first, but after contracting for an instant, it spread out violently. The entire battlefield was covered by the light in an instant. Both armies on the battlefield, regardless of their cultivation realm, even the royal lords and 9th Order masters, had their vision filled with white. Everything disappeared and nothing could be seen. The noisy and horrific battlefield went eerily silent for a moment, as if time had stopped flowing. The light that was of utmost purity exploded, penetrating the barriers of the void and shining far into the depths of the black ink battlefield. Even the detonation of the purifying black ink battleships was like a firefly next to the bright moon when compared to this scene. Never once had an explosion of purifying light of this magnitude been seen since the humans began using it to restrain black ink strength. Even Yang Kai had not predicted the terrifying power that was brought about by the sacrifice of 2,000 8th Order small stone race masters. Around the origin of the explosion of purifying light, there had been a large number of black ink clansmen holding the defense line, but after the eruption, the vast majority of those auras evaporated. Those who were lucky enough to survive still suffered a large drop in their strength. The explosion of purifying light brought about by the sacrifice of 2,000 8th Order small stone race masters had completely collapsed an entire segment of the Black Ink clan's defenses with just its after effects. Almost every Black Ink clansman in and around the no-return pass was affected by the purifying light to some degree, compromising their strength to a certain extent. After more than a dozen breaths, the dazzling light finally dissipated, and the eerie tranquility was disturbed by the noise of death and slaughter. As countless numbers of Black Ink clansmen howled in pain, Black Ink strength was constantly escaping uncontrollably from their bodies, as if they had accidentally fallen into a wok of hot oil. Seeing this situation, the human race army attacked with all their might. They would never miss such a good opportunity. The purifying light was a great danger to the Black Ink clan, but it had no effect on the humans. Originally, the Black Ink clan army were fighting hard to resist the humans, so it was difficult to break through their defenses, but every front was given a good opportunity now to strike. In a matter of breaths, they easily broke through each defense line and routed the Black Ink clan's forces. Yang Kai himself did not expect that his trump card against the Black Ink Giant Spirit God would fundamentally alter the tide of war and save countless numbers of human race soldiers. At this moment, he did not pay attention to the battlefield of the armies and instead turned his head towards a certain place in the void. Standing there was a huge creature, one of the Black Ink Giant Spirit Gods. This Black Ink Giant Spirit God had originally come out from the Divine Spirit Ancestral Land, the same one who was restrained by the combined efforts of Xiao and Wuxia for thousands of years. Yang Kai had dealt with it several times in the past. It had never properly looked at Yang Kai since from its standpoint, Yang Kai was nothing more than an ant, no matter how powerful he was. Whether it was a strong ant or a weak ant, there was no difference to it. But now, it finally had to face this ant that it had been ignoring, and it was because this ant actually had the power to wound it, even if it was through borrowing an external force. Yang Kai's gaze swept over the Black Ink Giant Spirit God's figure, especially the two stumps where its arm and leg had been torn off from. Thick, viscous black blood spurted out of the huge wounds like two black fountains. It was a spectacular sight to behold. The arm that he lost was in Ada's arms while the missing leg was wrapped between Ada's two legs. The moment when the purifying light erupted, the Black Ink Giant Spirit God had decided to act like a lizard and sacrifice its tail to save its body. Yang Kai's brows knitted into a frown. From the wounds on the Black Ink Giant Spirit God's arm and leg, it was evident that they were severed voluntarily. Unable to break free from Ada's grip, it had no other choice but to regain its freedom through such a decisive method. Yang Kai was glad that he made the small stone race masters cling to the giant spirit god's body when he summoned them, otherwise, it might have actually been able to evade a direct hit from the purifying light. Even though Yang Kai wasn't able to fully unleash the purifying light's might against his foe, the Black Ink Giant Spirit God still lost an arm and a leg. Moreover, Yang Kai could clearly sense that its aura had weakened significantly. It managed to break free from Ada's grip by sacrificing an arm and leg, but the purifying light still played a significant role, which could be seen from the Black Ink strength leaking endlessly from its body. This Black Ink Giant Spirit God was no longer the same master that inspired fear and despair in people's hearts from before. Yang Kai raised his hand and summoned his Azure Dragon Spear. Dao strength shook and the space-time river manifested. The long river coiled around the spear, giving the Azure Dragon Spear an indescribable sense of spirituality. Ada, let's go! Yang Kai shouted. Lifting his spear, his aura rose steadily. After feigning weakness for so many years, he could finally unleash his full power without any restraint. Yang Kai was cheering in joy inwardly. It felt like he had finally broken free of the shackles that bound him and regained his freedom. Yeah. Ada responded with a resounding voice. Immediately, Ada grabbed the arm and leg that his opponent discarded and began using them as weapons, swinging and smashing them fiercely, creating violent shockwaves and displaying his imposing power. Yang Kai turned his head with difficulty and saw Ada getting further and further away, causing his battle aura, which had risen to a peak, to nearly collapse. Where is it? I can't see it. Ada's thunderous voice shook the void, his vision still completely white. Though being enveloped by the purifying light at such a close range did not cause any real damage to Ada, it temporarily blinded him, so how could he still see where his opponent was? Before Yang Kai could call out to him, he was already engulfed in a sense of great crisis. When Yang Kai turned around, he saw that the Black Ink Giant Spirit God had already raised its remaining hand and swung it down in the direction where he was located. The hand that covered the void appeared slow, but it was actually extremely fast. The moment when this giant hand was about to smash him, Yang Kai could even feel space solidifying around him. The power of this attack was absolutely terrifying and Yang Kai could clearly see the void shattering wherever it passed. With no way to escape, Yang Kai let out a roar and thrust his spear out. Around his spear, the space-time river shook and myriad Tao strengths burst forth, breaking through the confines of space. Yang Kai became one with his spear, transforming into a stream of light and rushing straight towards the approaching hand. Before he even truly collided with the palm, Yang Kai was met with an overwhelming force. Yang Kai felt like he had run into an invisible blockade that was as sturdy as any metal. His body shook violently as he blocked the thunderous attack, coughing up golden blood in the process. In the next instant, the large hand that covered his whole vision suddenly closed, seemingly trying to squash him to death. The palm closed into a fist, but a stream of light emerged from between the cracks of its fingers. It was Yang Kai who was able to escape in time before disaster struck. World force surged and Tao strength shook. Yang Kai turned into a thunderbolt, sweeping upwards along his opponent's extended arm like a thunder dragon. Martial Peak, Chapter 5909, The End Has Come. There were pros and cons to having a large body. First of all, there was the difficulty in moving around in a fight and the lack of dexterity, but a large size also allowed one to take much more damage without being critically wounded. Fatal attacks could often become just mere scratches from the size difference alone. Yang Kai had a deep understanding of that fact as he had experienced it himself many times in the past through fighting using his dragon transformation secret art. In terms of size, the Black Ink Giant Spirit God surpassed even his divine dragon form, and thus the advantages that came with his massive size would also be amplified to the extreme. The flayed wounds on its neck that were spouting black blood may look horrific, but in truth, it was nothing much for a Black Ink Giant Spirit God. Despite its strength being greatly weakened by the purifying light, the Black Ink Giant Spirit God was still undoubtedly worthy of being the so-called Supreme One's soul clone. The flesh at the wound writhed and rich black ink strength poured out, then the injury was quickly stabilized. Only Yang Kai's Tao strengths were not that easy to disperse and remained stuck to its wound, constantly changing and evolving, continuing to cause damage. Seeing this, Yang Kai made an instant decision to retrieve his spear and escape. Before the Black Ink Giant Spirit God could swing its palm over again, Yang Kai stuck to its shoulder and rushed in the opposite direction. In the blink of an eye, Yang Kai reached the stump of its severed arm, which was still losing thick black blood, but in just a short moment, the terrifying wound was greatly relieved. It would likely take no more than a couple dozen more breaths for the severed arm to scab over just like its neck, leaving only a closed wound behind without black blood oozing out anymore. Its regenerative abilities were truly shocking. Yang Kai raised his spear, and as world force surged, his body moved with his weapon, turning into a spiral that drilled into the wound at his arm. The Black Ink Giant Spirit God was instantly overtaken by an immense pain that caused it to hiss in shock and anger. "What are you doing?" Yang Kai did not answer. He had brought out his full strength and merged with his spear, turning into an unstoppable blade that broke through the thick blockade of black ink strength, trying to penetrate into the Black Ink Giant Spirit God's body from its wound. "Don't even dream of it." The Black Ink Giant Spirit God knew what was coming. No matter how strong it was, it still could not anticipate what would happen to it if it allowed Yang Kai to succeed. Its huge eyes were filled with fear and panic. It never thought that it would fall into such a situation in such a short amount of time since the fight began. As soon as it finished speaking, it raised its hand and slapped it down at Yang Kai, as if swatting at a mosquito that was biting it. If that palm connected, then Yang Kai would die even if he were to transform into his divine dragon form. At the same time, it also exerted all of its power to form a viscous yet sturdy defense around the wound to stop Yang Kai's invasion. As long as it could swat its opponent to death before he had a chance to invade its body, then the crisis would be easily resolved. Yang Kai felt an unprecedented crisis fall upon him, and as the Black Ink Giant Spirit God's palm descended, he could keenly feel death enveloping his body and mind, causing him to feel suffocated. Not a single part of him, both inside and outside, was not trembling in fear. Even though he had encountered many life-or-death crises throughout his cultivation journey, he had never encountered one as strong as this one. Death was so certain that it almost gave him the illusion that he had already died. The defense that was formed out of black ink strength at the wound was extremely sturdy. Even though Yang Kai attacked with full force, he was not able to break through it instantly. Moreover, his opponent did not just lay out a single defense, instead, it was constantly repairing and strengthening it. Naturally, the best option here would be to just give up and escape in order to ensure his safety, then search for another opening to exploit. However, after such an experience, it would not be so easy to get another opportunity like this, as the black ink giant spirit god would definitely be on its guard. In this life-or-death moment, Yang Kai's lips curved into a fierce smirk, and his already terrifying aura climbed to even greater heights, causing the surrounding space to tremble in unrest. "You court death!" The black ink giant spirit god roared furiously and swung its palm down even more fiercely. Everywhere its palm passed, space crumbled like a shattered mirror. The huge palm suddenly stopped when it was only a dozen or so kilometers away from Yang Kai, as if it had encountered a huge resistance. It was a severed arm extended across the void that suddenly blocked its fierce attack, an arm no different from its intact arm in terms of length and shape. Ada had finally returned. He had blocked the fatal blow for Yang Kai at this most critical moment. Yang Kai had also seen Ada rushing over from the corner of his eye, which was what made him put his all into this decisive move. Holding a severed arm in one hand and a severed leg in the other, Ada was furious, almost face to face with the black ink giant spirit god, and shouted fiercely, "What do you think you're doing to my little friend?" In this era of endless black ink strength, as members of the giant spirit god clan, it was difficult to even find food to eat. Their little friend was now his and A's only source of food. If their little friend were killed, wouldn't they have to starve in the future? The simple-minded Ada had long realized that only his little friend could provide them with delicious food, so no matter what happened, he would not allow his little friend to be harmed in any way. Anyone who dared to hurt his little friend must die. Faced with Ada's fury, the black ink giant spirit god could only respond with a pained howl. Because the moment when its attack was blocked by Ada, a violent shockwave hit Yang Kai's back like an invisible wall. In that instant, the bones in Yang Kai's body could be heard cracking, but it was also that force that allowed him to break through the blockade of black ink strength. Body and spear united as one as he plunged into the black ink giant spirit god's severed arm. All light disappeared and boundless darkness engulfed him. Yang Kai felt like he had fallen into a pitch-black ocean, but he moved forward without hesitation, breaking through layers of physical barriers and diving straight into the black ink giant spirit god's body. As his spear traveled through the body of the black ink giant spirit god, it encountered significant resistance at first, but in a few breaths, the resistance suddenly weakened. Ada, who had launched a fierce flurry of attacks on the black ink giant spirit god, forcibly diverted its attention to protecting itself, which naturally meant that it could not fully focus on Yang Kai, who had invaded its body. In the vast void, the battle between the two giant spirit gods was extremely brutal, but Ada clearly had the upper hand. Wielding the severed limbs of his opponent as weapons, every blow caused the injured black ink giant spirit god to stagger and stumble in a pitiful state. When the other black ink giant spirit god saw what was happening, it tried to come over and support its ally, but how could allow him to do so? With everything he had, he kept it firmly tied down. On a different battlefield, Missouri Na-Ye's eyes trembled violently, his face filled with disbelief. In fact, when Yang Kai unleashed his full strength, Mo Na-Ye had already sensed that something was amiss and an unlikely scenario sprang in his heart. His intelligence made him doubt this thought, but now it seemed that his unbelievable suspicions were confirmed. He has been hiding his strength all this time? Mo Na-Ye asked while defending against Mi Jingluan's furious attacks. What do you think? Mi Jingluan replied casually while searching for his opponent's weakness. Naturally, he would not be kind enough to answer his enemy's question. However, this response only made Mo Na Yi more certain of his own judgment. Why? He muttered in disbelief. Yang Kai had been concealing a massive army of 8th Order small stone race masters. He must have possessed them for many years, yet hid them all so he could use them against the Black Ink Giant Spirit God, which was understandable since they could not be exposed easily as it would alert the Black Ink clan, then it would be difficult for them to play their part as a hidden weapon. But why would Yang Kai also conceal his true strength? Judging from the aura erupting from Yang Kai earlier, his true strength was absolutely terrifying. If he had such strength, then why had he been hiding it for so long? If he revealed his true strength during the previous 10-year war, how many pseudo-royal lords would have suffered? Even he, a royal lord, might not have survived. Why do you think? Mi Jingluan gave an equally generic answer, his fan sweeping out fiercely, sending a violent wind blade that cut a deep wound into Mo Na Ye's abdomen. He had finally found an opening. Perhaps it was because Yang Kai's performance distracted Mo Na Yi, but the royal lord had truly lost his bearings at this moment. Mo Na Yi reeled back as black blood spurted out, but Mi Jingluan's unending attacks followed him closely. Suddenly, Mo Na Yi gave a weary scoff. I understand now. It was the Black Ink Giant Spirit Gods. There was only a single time where they managed to kill a Black Ink Giant Spirit God, but that was only with Aer's help and at great cost. But now, with only Yang Kai and a single Giant Spirit God, the humans were able to force a soul clone of the Supreme One into a desperate situation. Martial Peak, Chapter 5910, Universe covered in black ink. Fierce battles were taking place everywhere on the vast battlefield, but the most intense and shocking one was undoubtedly the fight between the Giant Spirit Gods and the Black Ink Giant Spirit Gods. Aer and his opponent were fully entangled, their powerful clashes causing space itself to shatter. Void cracks appeared one after another and clung onto their large bodies like spider webs, and from those cracks, an extremely strong aura of chaos and nihility was spilling out. Only two fates awaited ordinary creatures in such an environment. One was to fall in and become lost in the void. If they were very lucky, they might find a way out, but if not, they would be forever trapped. The second outcome was to simply be sliced to pieces and die. Each void crack was a tear in space, so it naturally possessed immense power. Nothing good could come to those who came into contact with these torn and displaced cracks. However, the two massive beings confronting each other in this dangerous environment at this very moment were not ordinary by any definition. The void cracks, which would normally be a death sentence, merely left slight scratches on their skin, barely able to cut them at all. Looking from afar, these two supreme masters were surrounded by endless cracks, making it look as if they were fighting in another spacetime. On the other hand, Ada's battle with the second Black Ink Giant Spirit God was a completely different situation. Thanks to Yang Kai's sudden attack and the sacrifice of 2008th Order small stone race masters, this Black Ink Giant Spirit God had only battled Ada for a short time before losing an arm and a leg, which could be said to have greatly damaged its foundation. Now, with Yang Kai wreaking havoc inside its body, the Black Ink Giant Spirit God had to divert some of his attention to defend against him, so it had completely fallen into a disadvantage in the face of Ada's furious beating. With each strike that landed, the Black Ink Giant Spirit God staggered and was sent flying back, whereas Ada only became stronger as the fight went on. Though the severed limbs of the opponent didn't possess any kind of divine power, they were incredibly tough and displayed tremendous power in Ada's hands. In no more than a few dozen breaths, the Black Ink Giant Spirit God was in a miserable state covered in black blood, the panic in its eyes gradually deepened. At this moment it was facing not only Ada's flurry of attacks, but also what Yang Kai was doing inside its body, which was the true source of its fear. It could keenly feel that as Yang Kai moved within its enormous body, the auras of countless life forms were being left behind. Even though it had no time to examine what was happening, it knew very clearly just what those living creatures were. Realizing that its death was inevitable if it did not act, the black-ink giant spirit god roared and forcibly blocked Auda's ferocious attacks before suddenly, its body shook and it snarled, "The universe shall be covered in black ink." As soon as those words were spoken, the black ink strength lingering outside its body, which was like a dense fog, solidified for a moment before being drawn into its body by an invisible force. The price it paid for this was being struck fiercely on the forehead by Auda's attack, causing a part of its skull to cave in. At that moment, Yang Kai, wielding the azure dragon spear, was still drilling his way through the thick black ink strength blockade as he shuttled around inside of the black ink giant spirit god's body. The portal to his small universe had been opened, and as he swam about, a massive number of small stone race soldiers poured out of his small universe and took up positions inside of the black ink giant spirit god. Yang Kai had brought some 400 million small stone race soldiers from the chaotic dead territory and handed quite a large percentage of them to the Ninth Order Masters to distribute to the human army in order to enhance its forces. However, he still left some behind as reserves. Besides the numerous Eighth Order small stone race masters that were sacrificed earlier, Yang Kai still had a large army of at least 30 million below the Eighth Order. These small stone race soldiers were constantly charging out of his small universe and invading the black ink giant spirit god's body. When the black ink giant spirit god finished speaking though, Yang Kai clearly felt the boundless darkness in this place become even darker. It was a very strange feeling as there was supposedly no way a darkness where an ordinary person could not even see their fingers in front of them could get even darker, but that kind of feeling did arise in Yang Kai. In the next instant, he realized that his small universe was shaking violently, and the open portal also closed involuntarily. Shocked, Yang Kai quickly examined himself and was aghast to find the World Tree clone swaying violently while propping up the invisible boundary wall around his small universe. Outside of the boundary wall was black ink strength of a purity he had never seen before, and it was trying to break into his small universe. With the World Tree clone to isolate and protect his small universe, it remained flawless and undamaged for thousands of years, invulnerable to external forces. It had a similar effect to the 4 universe pillars, but even stronger. Since obtaining the World Tree clone, Yang Kai had never been worried that his small universe would be stained by black ink strength. That was because black ink strength could not break his small universe's boundary wall nor corrupt his small universe with the World Tree clone shielding it. Currently, the black ink strength's attack and the World Tree clone's protection were like a spear and a shield. If the protective shield was strong enough, it could ignore the attack of the sharp spear. In the past, the protective shield of the World Tree clone could easily block the corruption of black ink strength regardless of its source. Yang Kai had never felt affected by it before, and he could even recklessly enter environments full of black ink strength. It was an act other open heaven realm masters were fearful of, yet he could do so without worrying about being corrupted by black ink strength. But this time, Yang Kai clearly felt that the protective shield of the World Tree clone was under pressure. This was undoubtedly an indication that the black ink giant spirit god was using a powerful technique against him. Yang Kai couldn't help but think of the Royal Lord's secret technique. The humans had never been able to figure out how the Royal Lords cast their secret technique. Yang Kai had also endured this secret technique head-on more than once, but with the World Tree clone and the soul-warming lotus protection, it had never affected him. The humans had very limited information on the Royal Lord's secret technique, but what they did know was that this technique could only be performed by a true Royal Lord, and that it can be activated silently. Those targeted by the Royal Lord's secret technique could not resist unless they were in the Ninth Order. Even the most experienced veteran Eighth Order masters would be corrupted instantly by black ink strength when this move was unleashed. Back when the human race army first clashed with the Black Ink clan in the Barren territory, it was through a use of the Royal Lord's secret technique that 3 Eighth Order masters were corrupted, allowing them to infiltrate the divine spirit ancestral land in the depths of shattered heaven and awaken the black ink giant spirit god there. As a result, the human race was routed and had no choice but to give up the barren territory. But despite how powerful the Royal Lord's secret technique was, it was rarely used, as once it was activated, the user's foundation would be greatly damaged, causing a significant decline in strength. Therefore, Royal Lords generally did not use this technique unless they were in absolute control of the situation. The first Royal Lord that Yang Kai killed was the one he fought just after advancing to the Eighth Order Open Heaven realm. That Royal Lord had wanted to get rid of Yang Kai for good by using the secret technique. This was due to him being angry out of shame from being unable to catch him after chasing him for several dozen years. It severely damaged his foundation as a result, providing an opportunity that Yang Kai took advantage of. If Royal Lords could use such a bizarre secret technique, how could the Black Ink giant spirit gods, who were soul clones of Mo, not be capable of something similar? Therefore, when Yang Kai sensed that something was amiss, he knew that the Black Ink giant spirit god had to have used a technique similar to the Royal Lord's secret technique, and that was why even the World Tree clone's protective shield was feeling pressured. Yang Kai couldn't help but think back to Tsang's words. Despite knowing he had a World Tree clone to isolate and protect his small universe, Tsang had specifically warned him to be wary of Mo. In other words, even with the World Tree clone, he could still fail to resist Mo's Black Ink strength. Inside his small universe, the swaying of the World Tree clone became more and more violent. Yang Kai could clearly feel the pressure on his last line of defense, which finally made him realize that what Tsang warned him about back then was not an exaggeration. The Black Ink giant spirit god was already pressuring the World Tree clone, so what if he were to face Mo itself? The World Tree clone really might not be able to protect him then. Moreover, trouble never arrived alone. As his small universe was bearing enormous pressure, Yang Kai can clearly feel his knowledge sea being invaded as well. Boundless black ink strength gushed over, staining his originally colorful knowledge sea completely black. The corruption of black ink strength on cultivators had always been both a physical and spiritual affair. Inside Yang Kai's knowledge sea, on the small seven-colored island formed by the soul-warming lotus, two figures sat idly across each other, playing chess. One of them had a humanoid form while the other had a beast form. These two figures were naturally Yang Kai's two other selves. Since his three selves united, Yang Kai advanced into the Ninth Order, but Thunder Shadows and Fang Tianxi's consciousnesses were preserved and had been staying in the soul-warming lotus all these years. This was the best place for them to remain, as without the soul-warming lotus nurturing, they might have perished with the loss of their physical bodies over time. When the boundless black ink strength surged in, Fang Tianxi immediately noticed that something was amiss. When he looked over, there was a look of surprise in his eyes. Thunder Shadow also stood up in a panic, knocking over the chessboard in the process and exclaiming, "Black ink strength? What is Big Brother doing? How could black ink strength reach this place? Big Brother isn't going to be corrupted, is he? Oh, no. What do we do?" He made a scene, looking extremely worried. Fang Tianxi, however, looked at him speechlessly. Reaching out, he restored the knocked-over chess pieces back to their original positions. "Don't try to shift focus. You're about to lose." Thunder Shadow turned its head to look at him, shouting, "Who has the heart to play chess with you at such a critical moment? If Big Brother is stained by black ink, we're done for. When that happens, Big Brother will definitely pull us out and eat us one by one." Fang Tianxi's brow couldn't help but twitch. Firstly, if the true body is corrupted by black ink strength, we will also be corrupted by it. Secondly, this is the soul-warming lotus, a supreme treasure of the universe that can shield and nurture the soul better than any other item in existence. With the soul-warming lotus, even if black ink strength were to invade the true body, Big Brother would still be able to hold on to a trace of clarity and will not be completely corrupted by black ink strength. Is that so? Thunder Shadow sat down with a clueless expression on its face. Fang Tianci couldn't endure it any longer, drop the pretentious act. You're not a sore loser, are you? Thunder Shadow scoffed, chess isn't fun. Let's play something else. So, you finally admit that you're not my opponent. Fang Tianci looked at it scornfully with his nose in the air. Thunder Shadow bellowed, who's not your opponent? Don't think that I have to endure your provocations just because you're the second brother. You better watch your mouth. Then, let's continue. It's your turn. Fang Tianci gestured to the board. Thunder Shadow hesitated for a moment before gritting its teeth. Just watch as I destroy you until you don't even have a single piece of armor left. As black ink strength surged in, the only pure land in Yan Kai's knowledge sea was a chess game where one man and one leopard unceasingly exchanged moves. Martial Peak, Chapter 5911, Killing the Black Ink Giant Spirit God. Inside the body of the Black Ink Giant Spirit God, an army of millions of small stone race soldiers were scattered about. If they had been ordinary small stone race members, they might not be able to withstand the corruption of the thick black ink strength, but these small stone race masters had grown by consuming the extremely pure yin or yang energy of the burning light and serene glimmer, so they had a natural resistance to it. Moreover, they were extremely sensitive towards black ink strength and viewed it as their absolute enemy. As soon as they were released, they began attacking the black ink giant spirit god from inside its body, causing it to experience what the pain of being devoured by countless ants was like. No matter how indestructible the black ink giant spirit god was outside, its internal defenses were naturally much weaker. Yang Kai's original plan was to summon all of the small stone race soldiers from his small universe, which amounted to around 30 million, but he had no choice but to stop because of the black ink giant spirit god's secret technique. The longer such an intense battle dragged on, the greater the variables became. As soon as he sensed the black ink giant spirit god's unusual move, Yang Kai decisively activated the great sun and moon marks. The next moment, the tens of millions of small stone race each shone brightly. Yellow and blue lights began to flow and blend in the extremely dark environment, turning it pure white, creating a mystical scene. In the void, Ada once again swung down his opponent's severed arm, smashing it fiercely towards the black ink giant spirit god and hitting it squarely in the neck until its head was slightly bent out of shape. At the same time, the black ink giant spirit god's face distorted in extreme pain, as if it was being subjected to unbearable torture. Then, a bright white light overflowed from its mouth and nose. It howled in pain, and its roar echoed throughout the universe, frightening all black ink clansmen who heard it. The bright white light was not only overflowing from its mouth and nose now, but also from the stumps of its severed limbs and even from the wounds all over its body, creating columns of light like 10,000 swords piercing through its flesh. As the columns of light emerged, so did a figure covered in black blood, rushing out with his spear. It was none other than Yang Kai. He turned his head to look at the pitiful appearance of the black ink giant spirit god and could clearly sense that its aura had weakened greatly. This eruption of purifying light had an even more profound effect than the sacrifice of 2,000 eighth-order small stone race masters from before. It made sense, after all, the previous blast of purifying light only enveloped the black ink giant spirit god from the outside, making it a purely external attack, but now, the purifying light was created by the fusion of an army of tens of millions exploding inside its body, meaning almost all of the impact was absorbed by it without any escaping. So, despite the fact that the quality was somewhat lacking, the quantity made up for it, and the damage to the black ink giant spirit god was even greater than before. Ada charged forward once again. Even though his intelligence was lacking, he was still a member of the giant spirit god clan whose battle instincts were incredibly strong. Seeing his enemy in such a miserable state, there was no way he would miss this perfect opportunity. In just a few steps, he reached the black ink giant spirit god and, wielding its severed arm and leg, unleashed a flurry of attacks that left a bloody spectacle wherever they struck. Following the weakening of its aura and the damage to its foundation, the black ink giant spirit god's defense also became weaker. The black ink giant spirit god roared and struggled to resist, but it was simply no match for Ada at this moment. Faced with this barrage of attacks, it could only defend while being forced back step by step. A dragon roar sounded abruptly and a golden light burst forth as a 100,000 meters divine dragon appeared. The dragon shot forward, taking advantage of when the black ink giant spirit god was already overwhelmed, and wrapped around its neck, looping itself around it. Then, the divine dragon lifted his large head and looked the black ink giant spirit god in the eye right in front of him. Despite his large form, the dragon still appeared small compared to the massive black ink giant spirit god. From a distance, it was like a small snake wrapped around a person's neck. The black ink giant spirit god loathed Yang Kai deeply. Knowing that this situation was likely to be disastrous, it directly abandoned its defense against Ada and reached out its one remaining hand to grab the divine dragon. Yang Kai had taken on his dragon form, which allowed him to control his time Dao strength much better than when he was in his human form. After all, the Dao of time was the innate grand Dao of the dragon clan. As such, the hand that was trying to grasp him was instantly surrounded by a profound field which made it become extremely sluggish. Opening his dragon maw, a dragon breath spewed forth and smashed into one of the black ink giant spirit god's eyes. In the next instant, the giant eye burst apart. Repeating the same thing on the other side, Yang Kai quickly destroyed the black ink giant spirit god's other eye as well. With both eyes gone, the black ink giant spirit god let out another miserable cry before unleashing all its power, breaking through the time principle blockade, allowing its stalled hand to regain its freedom. However, its attack was interrupted by a fierce blow from Ada before it could reach Yang Kai. Yang Kai took advantage of this opportunity to unleash one Dragon Clan secret technique after another, bombarding the black ink giant spirit god's face at close range. Every secret technique was as powerful as an all-out attack of a peak Ninth Order master, and in just a short amount of time, the face of the black ink giant spirit god had been turned into a bloody mess. Despite that, the black ink giant spirit god still refused to die, displaying a tenacious vitality that Yang Kai couldn't help but marvel at. Since the war between humans and Black Ink Clan began, the humans had only managed to kill a single Black Ink giant spirit god, which happened during the battle in the Barren Territory several thousand years ago. However, they also paid a huge price for that success, with more than a dozen Ninth Order masters dying in battle. Furthermore, Air was there to provide assistance, and that black ink giant spirit god was already injured and had been prepared to be sacrificed. It could be said that the reason why the black ink giant spirit god was killed in that battle was partly because the Black Ink Clan was willing to pay any price to breach the Barren Territory and invade the 3,000 worlds. Nevertheless, the humans had also paid a high price to slowly wear down their opponent and kill it. As to what they were supposed to do in order to quickly kill a black ink giant spirit god now, the humans still lacked experience and ideas. The black ink giant spirit god in front of them had almost no ability to resist, as it was attacked by Yang Kai in his divine dragon form and Ada, but its extraordinary vitality still basically made it immortal and indestructible. Seeing this, Yang Kai had no choice but to act ruthlessly. When his dragon jaws opened, a golden round bead emerged. It was his dragon bead. The moment the dragon bead appeared, the black ink giant spirit god was able to sense that something was amiss despite losing both its eyes. It opened its mouth and roared, trying to wriggle its neck free from Yang Kai's hold. However, the force applied to it rendered it completely immobile. The golden dragon bead shook faintly before turning into a golden light and blasting into the hole where the black ink giant spirit god's left eye used to be, then bursting out through the back of his head. As the residual energy swept into the depths of the void, a golden beam of light spanning 100 million kilometers was created. Such a fierce blow caused the black ink giant spirit god's neck and head to be flung back as it lost all strength in the hand it was waving around. Thus, the aura of a powerful being, powerful enough to shake the universe, crumbled and dissipated. However, Yang Kai still could not be rest assured. A loud dragon roar echoed across the battlefield, and the dragon coiled around the black ink giant spirit god's neck tightened its grip once again before soaring up into the void. The immense pulling force ripped into the neck of the black ink giant spirit god, directly separating its huge head from its body. At the wound, black blood erupted like a volcano, instantly dyeing a vast expanse of the void completely black. Another endless flurry of attacks from Ada landed immediately after, smashing the black ink giant spirit god until its body broke into pieces. It wasn't until this moment that the aura belonging to the black ink giant spirit god was completely extinguished. The black ink giant spirit god had fallen. From the moment Ada restrained this black ink giant spirit god, to when Yang Kai ripped its head off, only a short dozen breaths had passed. In such a short period of time, a powerful black ink giant spirit god was killed by the joint efforts of Yang Kai and Ada, regardless of how tenacious its vitality was, regardless of how profound Mo's creations were. There was no way it could have any vitality left after its body was literally smashed into paste. If the pseudo-royal lords were still guarding this place, they might have been able to hinder him somewhat, but all of them had left of the inner region of the no-return pass to fight under Mo Na Ye's order, so how could there be any masters left to stop Yang Kai? Within an incense stick of time, the no-return pass became a chaotic mess. All of the black ink nests, whether they were high rank, mid-rank, or low rank, were all destroyed without exception. Even the black ink clansmen that had escaped back to the pass for shelter, suffered heavy casualties. Without pause, Yang Kai disappeared in a flash. Somewhere in the battlefield, Missouri Na-Yi and Mi Jing Luan's fight was still going on, with the situation being extremely disadvantageous for the former. It was reasonable to say that since Mo Na-Yi had become a royal lord a few hundred years earlier than Mi Jing Luan had advanced to the Ninth Order, he should have a stronger heritage, yet in reality, he was completely suppressed by Mi Jing Luan. Naturally, such a situation arose because of the various changes that happened on the battlefield, causing Mo Na Ye's thoughts to be disrupted. This was especially so with Yang Kai's sudden surge in strength and the death of a black ink giant spirit god, which had an immense impact on him. The shrewd and cunning Mi Jing Luan naturally seized this opportunity to expand his advantage bit by bit until they reached the current state of affairs. Of course, with Mi Jing Luan's current cultivation, killing Mo Na-Yi would be difficult even with such an advantage, as he had to be extremely cautious against a final counterattack. In a fight between masters like them, the slightest carelessness could drastically change the outcome. That was why Mi Jing Luan did not dare to be careless in the slightest and kept a steady hand from the beginning, never taking risks in a rush for success. But at a certain point, his attacks grew more violent. At the same time, Mo Na-Yi keenly caught onto an opening in his defense and, after a moment of hesitation, his originally retreating figure suddenly rushed forward, taking advantage of the gap in Mi Jing Luan's secret techniques to throw a punch out. Mi Jing Luan's face immediately showed an expression of panic, and he instinctively tried to block it, but it was too late. As Mo Na Ye's fist was about to hit Mi Jing Luan's head though, Mo Na Ye's body suddenly shook as if he had been hit by a binding technique, freezing in place. His fist was less than a forearm's length away from Mi Jing Luan, and the violent force from it caused the opponent's clothes to flutter. In the face of imminent death, the panic in Mi Jing Luan's eyes disappeared and was instead replaced by an indifferent gaze. As expected. Mo Na-Yi laughed bitterly at Mi Jing Luan, but those words weren't meant for him. Behind Mo Na-Yi, Yang Kai's figure had appeared at some point, and the azure dragon spear pierced through Mo Na Ye's chest. Dao strengths lingered on Yang Kai's spear as space principles surged, solidifying the surrounding space. Even someone as strong as Mo Na Yi was unable to break free for a time. The three masters were arranged in a straight line in the void with Yang Kai at the back, Mo Na Yi in the center, and Mi Jingluan in the front. For a while, nobody spoke. The silence went on for a time before Mi Jingluan finally said, "You realize that I was baiting you." It was not a question, he was just stating a fact. When Yang Kai rushed over from the no-return pass, he sent a message to Mi Jingluan, which was why he suddenly revealed an opening. It was to lure Mo Na Yi into attacking him and creating a favorable opportunity for Yang Kai's ambush. Everything went smoothly and Yang Kai's ambush was extremely successful. So what if I saw through it? A bitter smile appeared at the corners of Mo Na Yi's lips. Mi Jingluan's eyes flickered, and he nodded lightly, "You had no choice but to take it." Even if he did see through the plan to lure the enemy out, Mo Na Yi could only make his move, hoping to severely injure or even kill Mi Jingluan before being hit by Yang Kai. That way, it wouldn't be a loss even if he died. Of course, he could also choose to evade Yang Kai's ambush, but all that would follow would be a joint attack from both Yang Kai and Mi Jingluan together, which would still be difficult for him to resist. So, he didn't have a choice at all from the start. Yang Kai tilted his head, his gaze passing Mo Na Yi by to look at Mi Jingluan as he commented, "Senior brother, that was too dangerous." He had communicated with Mi Jingluan to coordinate their actions, but he never expected the latter to use such a dangerous method. Even Yang Kai's heart was racing with fear for a moment. If he had moved just a bit slower, Mi Jingluan would have undoubtedly suffered serious injuries. Mi Jingluan responded indifferently, "Fortune favors the bold." Yang Kai sighed, not knowing what to say in reply. He had no doubt that Mi Jingluan trusted him, but he had no idea that Yang Kai had already exhausted too much of his strength in the previous battle. Even though he recovered some of it while destroying the black ink nests, the time was too short and he couldn't recover much of his strength. For example, Yang Kai could only use the same set of secret techniques he just used twice more before all his energy ran out again. If Mo Na Yi really managed to avoid his surprise attack, things would have become difficult. "Brother Yang, I have a question to ask before I die." Mo Na Yi spoke to Yang Kai behind him as he stood still, showing no intention to resist. Yang Kai raised a brow, "You may ask, but I may not necessarily answer." Mo Na Yi laughed bitterly, "You humans. How did you discover reinforcements were coming?" Mo Na Yi had speculated the reason the humans were so eager to take down the no-return pass, even at the cost of greater sacrifices, was because they must have discovered reinforcements were rushing over from the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction. Unfortunately, he still couldn't figure out how they managed to learn about them. It had to be known that the reinforcements were still more than 10 years away at best, a distance so great that it would have been difficult for the Black Ink clan to even contact them without the help of the Black Ink giant spirit god's divine ability and the Black Ink nests. Mo Na Yi had thought that the reinforcements would be the no-return pass Black Ink clan's ticket to survival, allowing them to pincer the humans from the front and back, catching them off guard. Who would have thought that it would become a death decree in the end? Reinforcements? What do you mean reinforcements? Yang Kai asked in a surprised tone. Mo Na Yi turned his head with difficulty so he could see his expression, but as he moved, the azure dragon spear shook slightly, forcing him to keep still. Yang Kai continued, "Where can your Black Ink clan get reinforce? The primordial heaven source Grand Restriction, is it? What happened over there?" Mo Na Yi's brow furrowed. Unable to see Yang Kai's face, he could only stare at Mi Jingluan, who had a look of sudden realization. "The thing you mentioned earlier was about the Black Ink clan's reinforcements?" There was a moment of confusion for Mo Na Yi. Before the war started, he tried to probe Mi Jingluan for clues but failed to get any answers. He had been confident that the humans must have known about their reinforcements, which was why they launched such a decisive attack, but now, judging from Mi Jingluan and Yang Kai's reactions, it seemed that they actually knew nothing about it. Do the humans really have no idea? Speak. Are Black Ink clan reinforcements from the primordial heaven source grand restriction on the way here now? How is that possible? Martial Peak, Chapter 59-13, Capturing the No-Return Pass. The immense pain distorted Mo Na Ye's features, but he gritted his teeth. I laugh at you humans for being so ignorant in the face of the Supreme One's power. No matter how hard you struggle, it is all meaningless, all your efforts will ultimately be in vain. He spoke as if he were stating a fact, or laying a malicious curse, but it also seemed like a prediction of the future. Yang Kai coldly snorted, you have a big mouth for someone with little skill. Mo Na Yi frowned, Brother Yang. Yang Kai shook the spear in his hand, interrupting his words as a strongly disgusted look emerged on his face. Who is your brother Yang? Do you even have the qualifications to call me your brother? Mo Na Yi looked surprised and stammered, I thought. Yang Kai interrupted him again, we have been fighting each other for many years, and we each have our own victories. So, you think that as opponents, we should be sympathetic to each other? Shouldn't we? Mo Na Yi tossed the question back. The disgust on Yang Kai's face deepened, it's you who knows nothing. I, Yang Kai, have been cultivating for thousands of years and encountered many powerful opponents. Indeed, there are some worth sympathizing with, because it was the pressure they gave me that enabled me to forge ahead step by step until this day, but that does not include you or any other Black Ink clansman. We are mortal enemies. Only by killing you can we humans find peace. Mo Na Yi was silent for a moment before suddenly realizing, only opponents are sympathetic to each other, not enemies. It seems you understand now. So answer me, where did the Black Ink clan's reinforcements come from? Did something happen at the primordial heaven source grand restriction? You only have one chance to tell me the truth. Yang Kai's icy words were biting like the cold chills of winter. Smirking, Mo Na Yi looked at Mi Jingluan across from him, Black Ink eternal. A violent force suddenly erupted from Mo Na Ye's chest. Yang Kai's 10,000 Dao strength surged. This royal lord, who had been commanding the situation in the Black Ink clan for thousands of years, was blasted into pieces with blood and severed limbs flying everywhere. Mo Na Yi had fallen. Yang Kai gave him only one chance to speak, but he had no intention of revealing any valuable information. Yang Kai naturally would not show mercy, and regardless of what answer Mo Na Yi gave, he still would not escape death today. Yang Kai would never give him another chance to escape. 700 years ago, he failed to kill Mo Na Yi when the universe furnace appeared, which had been a source of regret for him. Later, when the universe furnace closed, he thought he would have another chance to kill Mo Na Yi, but unexpectedly, he was brought to the edge of the universe by the universe furnace, allowing this guy to escape by some stroke of luck. Mo Na Yi knew it well, and Yang Kai had also expected this. All along, Mo Na Ye's biggest threat to the human race was not his strength, but his superior intellect that far surpassed all his other clansmen. If he hadn't been the commander of the Black Ink clan's war effort, this battle at the No-Return Pass would not have been as hard fought. Almost 30% of the human race's casualties in the war could be attributed to Mo Na Yi alone. Now, this royal lord had finally reached the end of his fate. Mi Jingluan reached out and grabbed a severed arm, the limb left behind by Mo Na Yi after his death. He pried open the large, tightly clenched fist and took out an unhatched Black Ink nest from his palm. Glancing over at Yang Kai, he asked, so this is the reason you tricked him? With the help of the Void Guard's investigation, the humans learned of the Black Ink clan's reinforcements, which was why they launched this battle so decisively. Mo Na Yi had suspected this, but he couldn't be completely sure. that was why he wanted to get confirmation before his death. Logically, it wouldn't matter even if Mo Na Yi knew the answer since he was going to die regardless. There was nothing a dying man could do about it, but when he asked the question and Yang Kai acted like he didn't know, Mi Jingluan quickly played along, pretending to know nothing. In the end, even when Mo Na Yi was killed, he couldn't figure out whether the humans knew about the Black Ink clan's reinforcements in advance or not. Yang Kai nodded, it was just in case. Though admitting it wouldn't make much of a difference, nobody could know what kind of changes it would bring to the situation if they did, therefore, Yang Kai always upheld a principle of not telling the enemy anything if at all possible. However, judging from the fact that Mo Na Yi was still holding onto the miniature Black Ink nest before he died, what happened here must have spread to the Black Ink clan's reinforcements. The reinforcements must have found out that their presence had been exposed and that a Black Ink giant spirit god had died in battle. Yang Kai was somewhat helpless about this. After he and Ada had teamed up to kill the Black Ink giant spirit god, he immediately rushed into the no-return pass and destroyed all the Black Ink nests to prevent the news from leaking, but the fact of the matter was, he couldn't completely prevent it. Black Ink nests were just too convenient in terms of transmitting information. The only fortunate thing now was that the Black Ink clan's reinforcements did not know about the existence of the Void Guard or the space arrays, nor would they have any idea what was going to happen next on the battlefield. The reinforcements traveling through the void had two options now. One was to speed up their march and rush to the no-return pass, hoping that the battle would not be over before their arrival. Then, they could assist their fellow clansmen on this side and maybe turn the tide. The second option was naturally to hold their position, get into formation and lay in ambush. They could then slowly start to build up their strength and prepare for the human race army to approach. Under the assumption that the humans knew nothing, it would only be natural for them to lay some sort of gigantic trap. But no matter which option they chose, they could not stop the fate of the Black Ink clan's destruction at the no-return pass. With the fall of a Black Ink giant spirit god, the outcome of the battle at the no-return pass has already been determined. Clenching his fist, Mi Jingluan crushed the Black Ink nest before gently waving his feather fan. Junior brother, you should rest for now. I'm afraid we may need your help to deal with the remaining Black Ink giant spirit god as well. As for the rest, you don't have to worry about them. You've already done enough. Yang Kai pondered for a moment and nodded lightly, N. After slaying the Black Ink giant spirit god and Mo Na Yi one after another, Yang Kai had exhausted too much energy and needed time to properly recover. Even though the outcome of the battle had already been determined, it was necessary to deal with the remaining Black Ink giant spirit god to end things completely. That thing was not easy to deal with. If the first Black Ink giant spirit god had not been too careless, it would not have fallen in such a short time. After Mi Jingluan left, Yang Kai focused on his recovery. Without setting up any defenses, he sat cross-legged in the void without any fear of being attacked by the Black Ink clan. When Mo Na Yi, a royal lord, was killed, the already fragmented Black Ink clan defense line worsened even further. Especially for those masters from the Black Ink clan who were fighting against human race masters. Witnessing the fall of the Black Ink giant spirit god had already shaken their minds. Now, with Mo Na Yi's death, the hearts of every territory lord, and even the pseudo-royal lords were filled with great fear and loss. Before the start of this war, everything had been under control, but once the fighting broke out, everything began to develop in a direction that the Black Ink clan did not hope to see, pushing them step by step towards the abyss. The fall of the Black Ink giant spirit god and Mo Na Yi has also caused a series of unpredictable chain reactions. On every battlefield, the auras of Black Ink clan masters constantly disappeared. And, with the fall of so many Black Ink clansmen, more humans were now free and were able to head over and support the tougher battlefields, quickly outnumbering and overpowering their enemies. The advantages of the humans on the battlefield quickly accumulated like a snowball. Seeing that the situation was going from bad to worse, many from the Black Ink clan couldn't help but think of escaping, but how could they possibly run away under these circumstances? Half a day later, as Dialuo's aura swelled up before dissipating, the Black Ink clan collapsed completely. An aura of despair enveloped every last Black Ink clansman, and in such a hopeless situation, many were forced into adopting the determination to make one last stand before their deaths. However, as things had fallen to this point, even if they had this determination, it was impossible to reverse the situation. Somewhere on the battlefield, Missouri Yu fought alone against Luo Tinghe, Wei Junyang, and Xiang Shan. Even though he was individually stronger than any one of these three, he was still struggling to take them all on at once. Originally, Luo Tinghe was his only opponent, but as the battle progressed, Wei Junyang and Xiang Shan gradually dealt with their own opponents and came to support her. Not only that, but Mou clearly felt that other Ninth Order masters had also directed a wisp of divine sense over to keep an eye on their battle. Under this situation, even if Mou could defeat the three Ninth Order masters, he was likely to be surrounded by even more Ninth Order masters soon after. What was more, he didn't have such ability. Knowing that death was inevitable, Mou let go of all his restraints and fought with the mindset that if even one was killed, it would make his death worth it. Thus, he ignored his own injuries and bombarding Xiang Shan with attacks, giving him a hard time. Fortunately, neither Luo Tinghe nor Wei Junyang were inexperienced weaklings. Together, the three of them prevented Mou from trying to take Xiang Shan down with him. This fierce battle lasted for almost half a day, and in the end, Xiang Shan endured a hit from his opponent but managed to counterattack and decapitate Mou. Endless sword chi then tore Mou's corpse into pieces. With that, all three of the royal lords had perished. From a couple hundred at their peak, now only a few dozen pseudo-royal lords remained, all of them struggling to survive and at risk of dying at any moment. As for the massive Black Ink clan army whose troops used to number in the hundreds of millions, most of them had been cut down, and their corpses could be seen littering the vast battlefield. Even at the heart of the no-return pass, humans were shuttling back and forth, killing off the remaining Black Ink clan soldiers. Xiang Shan was seriously injured, so he withdrew to heal while Luo Tinghe and Wei Junyang rushed to other battlefields without stopping. With the royal lords all wiped out, how could the remaining pseudo-royal lords withstand the slaughter of the human race's top masters? One by one, the auras of the pseudo-royal lords began to disappear. When the last one had his body burst apart with black blood splattering everywhere, the fiery-haired Ouyang Lai took a deep breath and clenched his fist. A peaceful silence washed over the vast battlefield. The chaotic war had long since stopped and the soldiers were looking around at each other, smiling. In the next moment, thunderous cheers erupted, the sound shaking the vast void itself. The humans had won. Sullivan, finally. Man Mo Nai is so far the longest focal enemy of Yang Kai. I actually kinda like him as a character. Not sure about you guys. He was like a roach. But, not horrendously written. Wish we got to know him more than just fights and schemes. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59-14, Human Race Great Victory. Around 4,000 years ago, the Black Ink clan army swept through and captured the No-Return Pass, then the fight moved to the Barren Territory, which they used as a springboard to invade the 3,000 worlds. This was the prelude to the fall. Since then, the original inhabitants of the 3,000 worlds, the human race, had been trapped in a corner. Enveloped in despair and darkness, the only human race's dogged determination allowed them to survive and develop over the past several thousand years. Countless had fallen in the unceasing battles until today when they finally reclaimed the No-Return Pass. In this battle, practically all the Black Ink clansmen in the No-Return Pass were ruthlessly killed. This battle also signified that the human race had regained the ability to fight back against the Black Ink clan. It was a battle worthy of being recorded in history to be admired by all future generations. The humiliation and oppression of many years had been fermenting in the hearts of every member of the human race, so when the final Black Ink clansman fell, the warriors could no longer suppress the joy in their hearts, tearing the void apart with the sounds of their cheers. However, the fight was not completely over yet. One last Black Ink giant spirit god was still stubbornly resisting. But anyone could see that it was on its last legs. With Ada and Air of the giant spirit god clan to restrain it, this Black Ink giant spirit god couldn't escape. After this, the humans need only cooperate with the giant spirit gods to take down the Black Ink giant spirit god. The human race army, despite having just achieved a great victory, did not delay for long. They did not even have time to tally their losses before their soldiers marched on with their weary bodies under orders from the supreme headquarters. The 12 armies of the human race were like 12 unstoppable torrents, blockading the void in all directions around the battlefield of the two giant spirit gods and the Black Ink giant spirit god. The remaining warships of each army were woven into one large fleet, and the power of the various arrays and artifacts on them began silently accumulating power. Their target was the Black Ink giant spirit god. Under this situation, even a being as strong as the Black Ink giant spirit god would not be able to help itself from feeling depressed as if it had come to the end of its life. It knew that nothing it could do would help it survive today. In fact, it had already felt the urge to run away immediately after Yang Kai and Ada killed the first Black Ink giant spirit god together. However, Air kept on getting in its way and it couldn't get away in time. In the short window Air bought, Ada rushed over to provide support, sealing its fate. Currently, the human race army has formed a siege with tens of millions of soldiers. This was the entire military strength that they could mobilize at present. If this was still not enough to deal with a single, cornered Black Ink giant spirit god, then what was the point of even talking about a grander crusade? On Puryong Pass, Mi Jingluan and the other Ninth Order masters were waiting silently. Ripples suddenly emerged in the void, and Yang Kai's figure appeared. Everyone turned over and nodded lightly at him, and not one person was looking at him without eyes filled with admiration. When it came to both age and experience, Yang Kai may not be able to compare with many of his peers here. Other than Shi Zhuang and Tang Tao who had only recently broken through to the Ninth Order, all the others had lived thousands, if not tens of thousands of years longer than he had. However, in terms of ability, he undoubtedly stood as the strongest among them all. If Mi Jingluan was to be called the wisest strategist of the human race army, then Yang Kai was undoubtedly its sharpest blade. Yang Kai's merits accounted for at least 70% of the Black Ink giant spirit god's death, while the remaining 30% was made up by Ada. Are we ready? Yang Kai asked. Mi Jingluan nodded. We were just waiting for you. Yang Kai gazed deeply at the Black Ink giant spirit god. Then, let's begin. Mi Jingluan immediately made a gesture, and when the messenger behind him, covered in blood, saw the sign, he immediately conveyed the order in all directions. At the same time, Yang Kai's divine sense surged and he transmitted a few words over. On the battlefield sealed by the human race army, 3 giant beings were fighting unceasingly, world-shattering shockwaves spreading out with each of their clashes. Ada and Air held the advantage fighting 2 against 1, leaving the Black Ink giant spirit god into a sorry state, covered in wounds all over its body. One of its legs even looked twisted, most likely from a broken bone. The giant spirit gods and Black Ink giant spirit gods hardly differed in strength, so in a one-on-one fight, it was basically impossible for either side to gain an advantage over the other. This was evident from all the clashes these supreme masters had fought in the past. Air and his opponent had literally fought non-stop for thousands of years in the barren territory, but let alone deciding a victor, even who had the upper hand was never determined. However, in such an even conflict, if another master of the same level was to join in, it would form an absolute advantage for the side with greater numbers. Even so, wanting to kill their opponent wouldn't be easy. Even Ada and Aer had to be cautious when facing the final struggle of such a powerful opponent. Fortunately, they had reinforcements from the human race to help them. Ada was slightly taken aback for a moment when Yang Kai's voice was transmitted over, but Aer reacted immediately and shouted at his brother, "Go!" Saying so, he kicked the black ink giant spirit god in the chest. That kick sent the black ink giant spirit god tumbling, and Aer used the momentum of the kick to back away. Even though Ada was a bit slower to react, he had two good things going for him. Firstly, he listened to his brother. Secondly, he listened to Yang Kai. At this moment, he naturally followed suit and quickly retreated while the black ink giant spirit god was staggering. After the two giant spirit gods had created enough distance between them, the void suddenly trembled and countless powerful auras rose up. In the next instant, tens of millions of streams of light swept over from all directions, covering the massive body of the black ink giant spirit god like a storm, their multicolored lights interweaving to form a blinding tapestry. At this moment, the power of the arrays and artifacts on the warships was activated, and the secret techniques and divine abilities of the masters were also being fully unleashed. They continuously bombard the black ink giant spirit god without end. At the center where their attacks were focused, the angry roar of the black ink giant spirit god rang out. For a powerful being like a black ink giant spirit god, ordinary attacks had little to no effect on it. Even the divine abilities of the Ninth Order Masters wouldn't deal much damage to it. However, when the number of these attacks reached a certain threshold and all struck at the same time, the accumulated power was something that no living being could ignore. With numbers, even ants could kill an elephant, let alone the elite soldiers of the human race who have survived countless life-and-death battles. The burst of light lasted for a long time, and before it even faded, a second volley arrived. The roars of the black ink giant spirit god stopped abruptly, and at the same time, everyone felt a strong aura suddenly flare up in the center of the interwoven lights before it faded away. On Pure Yang Pass, all the Ninth Order Masters had looks of astonishment on their faces. Even Yang Kai was surprised. After being taken aback for a moment, Mi Jingluan raised his hand. With the signal given, the attacks of the human race army quickly subsided. Even though the attacks stopped, the dazzling lights persisted for several dozen breaths before gradually dissipating. All eyes were locked on the space in front of them, and what they saw was not the black ink giant spirit god's figure, but only large and dense black ink clouds and remnants of a broken corpse. Yang Kai couldn't help but raise his brow. This second one died just like that? Just 2 rounds of concentrated attacks from the army were enough to kill it? After a moment of silence, Mi Jingluan said, "It seems we overestimated its strength." The plan was originally to weaken the black ink giant spirit god's power first before slowly grinding it down. After all, the 12 armies had already tightly sealed the entire region of the void while the 2 giant spirit gods and the Ninth Order Masters were also standing by. There was no escaping for the black ink giant spirit god here. Death was the only fate awaiting it. Who would have thought that before all their follow-up arrangements could come into play, the second black ink giant spirit god would be smashed to pieces? It made it seem as if they had made a big fuss over nothing. The pale-faced Xiang Shan commented from the side, "There's nothing wrong with being careful." It was not that the human race had overestimated the black ink giant spirit god's strength, just that such a good opportunity to set up and concentrate their attacks on it had never existed before. This was an attack powered by every master below the Ninth Order in the entire human race. The fact that the black ink giant spirit god could withstand the first volley without dying alone was enough to show its astonishing strength. The battlefield fell into an eerie silence once again. This sudden change left everyone feeling incredulous. Until Mi Jingluan's voice rang through the entire battlefield. Today, we have won a great victory for the human race." After a few breaths of silence, cheers that were even louder than before spread out like waves. Slaughtering the Black Ink clan and taking back the no-return pass essentially secured their victory, but there was still the last Black Ink giant spirit god to be dealt with, so the battle hadn't ended at that point. It wasn't until this moment and the second Black Ink giant spirit god was defeated that victory truly belonged to the human race. From this moment on, the humans had fully regained control of the no-return pass and once again secured the 3,000 worlds. No longer would they have to worry about the Black Ink clan invading. Feelings of joy and exhilaration were transmitted among all the soldiers. Many of the survivors wept, not because they were happy to survive, but because they had to mourn those who died in battle and could not see the glory of the human race's victory. The soldiers expressed their emotions freely. Yang Kai suddenly turned in a certain direction with joy in his eyes. In that direction, among the soldiers cheering in excitement, one person's aura was fluctuating violently. As his aura shook, his momentum soared rapidly. That person clearly realized what was about to happen and looked up towards Pure Yang Pass. Beside him, all the soldiers noticed the situation, and many showed envy in their eyes. Oh, Yang Lai laughed heartily, "That's Zheng Wuyu of my profound nether army. I'll go and give him some pointers." Saying so, he flew over to that side with a big smile on his face without any care for his tired and battered body. This couldn't be helped. The person named Zheng Wuyu was showing signs of breaking through his peak 8th order bottleneck, which meant that he was about to advance to the 9th order open heaven realm. It was exciting news for everyone. Since about 30 years ago, when Shi Zhuang and Tang Tao successively broke through into the 9th order, there had been no new 9th order masters among their people. But, everyone knew that Shi Zhuang and Tang Tao's breakthroughs were just the beginning. After them, more 9th order masters were sure to be born, and it was bound to be an endless process because the World Tree Clone's feedback in the open heaven realm cradles was just about to demonstrate its greatest effect. There had been a continuous stream of promising seedlings that had advanced directly to the 7th order over the past few thousand years, thus, it was only a matter of time before these seedlings reached their final destination, the 9th order. Martial Peak, Chapter 59-15, Heavens Bless the Human Race. As the first rising star to advance to the 9th order, Shi Zhuang's advancement could be seen as a sign that the humans had finally passed through the difficult times of stagnation where new masters were lacking to replace the old. Now, more 9th order masters would undoubtedly be born in the future. However, after Shi Zhuang and Tang Tao broke through into the 9th order, no new breakthroughs existed. Until this moment, when the second Black Ink giant spirit god fell and the humans recaptured the no-return pass, becoming the final victors of this war, Zheng Wuyu, an 8th order master, finally showed signs of a breakthrough. They can finally vent the feelings of oppression that have long been brewing within them. As their moods surged for the better, and their aura stirred, coupled with sufficient accumulation of heritage, breaking through their bottlenecks is a matter of course as the conditions are ripe. Mi Jingluan spoke softly as he looked in that direction. Yang Kai was thoughtful. If that's the case, more than one person may break through this time. In terms of time, many rising stars were qualified to break through to the 9th order and had already reached their current limits in the 8th order. However, breaking through was not that easy. Oftentimes, it depended on opportunities, which could be an epiphany or a sudden event, or maybe even a journey that comes by chance. Among these opportunities, any one of them would trigger one's heart to be moved and then stir up their aura into a state of making a breakthrough. It was thanks to the great victory they gained in this battle that Zheng Wuyu could touch upon this opportunity. If he could do it, then the other good seedlings with sufficient heritage accumulated could do it as well. That was what Yang Kai thought. As if to confirm his guess, similar aura fluctuations came from another direction just as soon as he finished speaking. A second 8th order master who sensed an opportunity for a breakthrough appeared. Luoting he looked over in that direction and said happily, "It's from the Red Flame Army. Please excuse me." Breaking through from the 8th Order to the 9th Order was a hurdle that once crossed, would give one the qualification to stand at the peak of their martial Tao and overlook all others. However, crossing that hurdle wasn't easy. At this time, the guidance of elders was very important, therefore, when Zheng Wuyu's aura surged, Ouyang Lai rushed over in a hurry. As the Profound Nether Army's commander, this was his responsibility. Meanwhile, the Red Flame Army never had a 9th Order master among their members, so Luoting he took the initiative to take on this responsibility. But that was not the end yet. During the next incense stick of time, various movements continued to appear among the 12 armies, all of them indicating that 8th Order masters were about to break through. This final battle with the Black Ink clan at the No Return Pass was like a miraculous medicine for them, bringing opportunities for breakthroughs to those rising stars with the victory that they had won. Yang Kai and 9 other 9th Order masters shuttled back and forth, each of them taking responsibility for several 8th Order masters, imparting their experiences of breaking through and pointing out the things they had to pay attention to. All of their charges naturally took note of what they said. This moment could be said to be the most important moment in their lives, and nobody dared to be careless. Even though all of them had expended a lot of energy in the previous battle, it was fortunate that all of them had made sufficient preparations for this moment, so as long as they recovered slightly, they could give their all in breaking through. Originally, recapturing the No Return Pass, slaughtering the Black Ink clan, and killing 2 Black Ink giant spirit gods was already the best consolation for all the soldiers who died in battle over the past few thousand years, but no one could have expected that as many as 23 8th Order masters would sense an opportunity to break through to the 9th Order at the end of this battle. This would in turn raise the overall strength of the human race significantly, which would be of great help to them in the upcoming crusade. Overall, the human race was not weak by any definition, but the number of 9th Order masters they had was relatively small. However, now it seemed that this disadvantage could also be compensated for. 4 of the 12 armies of the human race had always been without a 9th Order masters to lead them, so even though they had more divine spirits to make up for this, the absence of a 9th Order master had always been a disadvantage for them. Now, once these 8th Order masters broke through to the 9th Order, each army would have at least 3 9th Order masters assuming command. The strength of each army would then usher in a burst of explosive growth. Mi Jingluan was even considering whether to split the 12 armies up. After all, the number of soldiers in each army was indeed quite large and a little bloated. If they were split, then they could better utilize the strength of the soldiers. Of course, that was just an idea that sprang up. It would require the 9th Order masters to discuss and decide if they wanted to put such a plan into action before changes could be made. During the war, Mi Jingluan was able to command the entire army with a single word, but he would not act alone on important matters that might affect the future of the human race when they were not actively in combat. "I hope everything goes smoothly," Ouyang Lai, who was standing nearby, muttered. For so many 9th Order masters to break through at once was something that had never happened even in the late ancient era, when the humans first grasped the essence of the open heaven realm method. There would inevitably be failures today, and the only possible outcome of failure here was death. Therefore, while everyone is celebrating, Ouyang Lai was somewhat worried every one of these 23 people was an elite among elites, so it would be heartbreaking to lose any of them. While the 23 masters were accumulating strength and attempting a breakthrough, the rest of the army was either resting, cleaning up the battlefield, or counting the spoils of war. Over the years of fighting, the humans had basically used up every resource they gathered, spending every material as soon as it was collected. Yang Kai's huge demand for his cultivation was especially astonishing, almost equaling the amount invested in an entire army. So, even with 3 million cultivators scattered throughout the Black Ink battlefield, mining resources, they did not have much surplus on hand. It was fortunate that they captured the No Return Pass where the Black Ink clan must have some reserves. For thousands of years, the Black Ink clan had occupied most of the 3,000 worlds and the entire Black Ink battlefield, where they had been constantly mining resources and breeding more clansmen. Despite the immense expenditures, they should still have a large amount of resources in reserve. Soon, news was coming in from each direction. Mi Jingluan investigated the extent of the damages first. Even though he had a rough idea about it already, he couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief when he saw the results. The army's losses were much lower than he expected. Originally, when Yang Kai returned from the depths of the Black Ink battlefield and they decided to launch the final battle, they had mentally prepared themselves to face severe damage to the human race army's foundation. This was unavoidable though. The Black Ink clan's reinforcements were on their way, and if the humans did not capture the no-return pass quickly, they would have to face the fate of being caught in a pincer attack, which could very well destroy their entire army. But when the fight was actually done and over with, the extent of the damage was still within an acceptable range, and their losses were not as severe as had been expected. The greatest reason for that was because the battle had not dragged on too long. The critical moment was the fall of the first Black Ink giant spirit god. Together, Yang Kai and Ada were able to kill him in just a few dozen breaths, which greatly shook the morale of the Black Ink clan. Following that, Mo Na Ye's fall dropped the morale of the Black Ink clan even further, while also greatly disrupting their ability to coordinate and organize themselves. As they acted decisively and were able to settle the fight quickly, the losses to the human race army were naturally kept to a minimum. Of course, the purifying light that erupted from the sacrifice of the 2008th Order Small Stone Race Masters was also indispensable. At that time, the purifying light not only severely damaged the Black Ink giant spirit god, but almost instantly wiped out a large swath of Black Ink clansmen, while all the Black Ink clansmen over the entire battlefield were affected by it somewhat, lowering their strength to a certain extent. All these unexpected events laid the foundations for their grand victory. After looking through the battle report, Mi Jingluan handed it over to Yang Kai, who couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief as he swept his divine sense over it. The losses were not small, but weren't too large either. They still had the strength necessary to continue their crusade. If the casualties of this battle had exceeded 30%, they may have lost that ability. It should be noted that there were still the Black Ink clan reinforcements waiting for them, which was another difficult hurdle they had to jump through. All they had to do now was wait for the 23 Eighth Order Masters to break through and stabilize their cultivation. After the armies were reorganized, they could finally embark on the final crusade. Yang Kai looked out into the depths of the void with deep worry creasing his brows. Even now, he had no idea what had happened at the Primordial Heaven Source Grand Restriction nor what the situation was with the suppressing Black Ink army. His family and disciples were all over there, and it would be a lie to say that he wasn't worried about them. If he could, he would have rushed to the Primordial Heaven Source Grand Restriction as soon as he found out about the movements of the Black Ink clan's reinforcements. But he couldn't go earlier or even now. As the strongest Ninth Order Master, the battle at the No-Return Pass would not have ended so easily if he wasn't here. Between family and the survival of the entire human race, a choice had to be made. The only thing Yang Kai could be sure of now was that even if something did happen at the Primordial Heaven Source Grand Restriction, it was still in progress, otherwise, it would be impossible for there to not be a single true royal lord in the reinforcements. Though it was partly wishful thinking, this conclusion was the only comfort Yang Kai had in his heart. As time passed, the auras of the 23 people in the void continued to fluctuate, and each of them had an illusory phantom of their own small universe appear behind them. As their auras continued to fluctuate and their momentums rose continuously, their bottlenecks were gradually broken, and the boundary walls of their small universes that had reached their limit began expanding again. Martial Peak, Chapter 59-16, Tao Lord, please save me. In the midst of the grueling wait, an aura belonging uniquely to masters in the Ninth Order rippled out, and as their small universe burst out in expansion, everyone knew that the first successful Ninth Order master had appeared. It was not Zheng Wuyu, but instead another rising star from the Burning Moon Army. Everyone who was watching the situation closely couldn't help but reveal joyful expressions. The birth of the first Ninth Order master seemed to trigger a chain reaction. Within the coming half-day, a second and a third success appeared. After the day was over, the number had grown to as many as 7. By the next day, there were 11. By the third day, 14. The fourth day, 17. The success rates of the rising stars who have received feedback from the World Tree clones and possessed unparalleled talent were incredibly high. Until now, none of them had shown too many problems with advancing. However, there were still 6 who were struggling to break through, which Yang Kai and the others couldn't help but worry about. Breaking through as a result of sudden enlightenment had to be done in one fell swoop. The longer it dragged on, the worse the situation would become. 4 days have already passed. Those who were able to break through successfully had already broken through. The remaining 6 would likely experience some setbacks, which made the others worry and also feel helpless at the same time. Nobody could help another person break through, everything depended on their own hard work and accumulations. If their accumulation was enough and their luck was not bad, then they would naturally be able to succeed, just like the 17 before them. But fate was a tricky thing that nobody could perfectly predict. Yang Kai suddenly turned his gaze towards a certain direction. There, a person was pushing their aura hard. The illusory phantom of their small universe was constantly expanding and contracting behind them as if it were a living being that was breathing. If everything went smoothly, then once the illusory phantom of the small universe expanded to its limit, it would break through and expand greatly. However, Yang Kai clearly sensed that this cultivator was somewhat lacking in strength, and he couldn't help but sigh, knowing that it would be difficult for them to succeed with their current heritage. This was inevitable. Throughout history, the path from the 8th Order to the 9th Order had always been full of obstacles. If there existed those who succeeded, then it was only natural for some to fail as well. At a certain moment, when the illusory phantom of the small universe expanded again, there was an obvious sound of something breaking. This caused the expressions of all the Ninth Order masters who were paying attention to this person to change, and the cultivator who was trying to break through also had a panicked look on his face. He then opened his eyes with a bitter expression. The cracking sounds grew more and more intense, and the illusory phantom of his small universe was becoming difficult to maintain. His small universe seemed to be on the brink of rupturing. The person turned their head to Yang Kai, and after a moment of anxiety, his expression calmed down. He smiled, ready to accept his final fate. The next moment, his vision suddenly blurred, and Yang Kai, who had been observing from a distance, appeared in front of him and raised his hand to touch the top of his head. A river flowed and waves roared. The space-time river enveloped everything, and space-time strength suppressed and sealed the local space. Everything seemed to turn still, including the rupturing of the small universe. It is the same when you were in the 8th Order. You still killed our enemies and pushed them back. You also protected your allies behind you. Your eldest senior brother Miao's aptitude is limited. Unless he can obtain a supreme-grade open heaven pill, he will never be able to reach the 9th Order, but isn't he still living a fulfilling life? You didn't fail to break through because you have not worked hard enough. Destiny simply didn't favor you today, that is all, Yang Kai reassured him. Turning the conversation around, Yang Kai raised his voice, I only ask you one thing. Even if you cannot reach the 9th Order in this lifetime, can you still hold on to your original convictions and sacrifice yourself for the human race? Will you fight and slay our enemies to eradicate this evil? Wang Cheng answered meekly, naturally, I am willing, but Tao Lord, my small universe is about to rupture, can I still survive? The small universe was the foundation of every open heaven realm master. If the small universe ruptures, the cultivator would perish. Yang Kai grinned, "Are you dead now?" "Not yet." Wang Chang shook his head. Even he himself thought his answer was ridiculous after saying it. If you are willing to live, then you can live. If you are not willing, no one can save you. Wang Chang seemed to understand something, and his dark eyes lit up again. "Tao Lord, please save me." Yang Kai nodded lightly. Looking up at the small universe behind Wang Chang, he contemplated for a moment before extending a finger. At the same time, the space-time river that suppressed and sealed this space began to surge wildly. In the far-off void, Mi Jingluan and others were watching the situation attentively. Everyone was heartbroken. After 17 out of the 23 cultivators eligible to break through to the Ninth Order successfully advanced, a failure still appeared in the end. At such a critical moment, failure was equivalent to death. However, just as everyone was silently waiting for fate to carry out its judgment, the space-time river suddenly appeared, surrounded by the fluctuation of the space principles. It wasn't until this moment that everyone realized that Yang Kai had rushed over. No one knew why Yang Kai had gone over at this time, but before anyone could see what was happening, the space-time river suddenly disappeared. Following that, Yang Kai returned to his original position. It was as if he had never left. Only his face was slightly paler than before. "Junior brother, you," Mi Jingluan was shocked. "Huh? What just happened?" Yang Lai suddenly exclaimed, scaring Mi Jingluan so much that he choked on his words. Following his gaze, all the Ninth Order masters were shocked by what they saw. The rupturing of Wang Chang's small universe had mysteriously been reversed, leaving the illusory phantom behind him completely intact. The only differences were there was no longer any sign of a breakthrough going on, and Wang Chang's aura had become weaker, as if his foundation had been damaged. Many thoughts flashed through Mi Jingluan's mind as he turned to Yang Kai in astonishment. "Junior brother, what did you do?" Regardless of what Yang Kai did, they could tell from the results in front of them that Wang Chang, who was doomed to die, had been saved while his breakthrough had failed. Compared to dying and fading away, this was undoubtedly a good result. At the very least, Wang Chang had survived and could still contribute to the war. Yang Kai said, "I crippled hundreds of years of his foundation. Is that also possible?" Yang Lai couldn't stop his eyes from widening in surprise. This was an incredible event that was simply unheard of, but bizarre things seemed to happen around Yang Kai often. Xiang Shan furrowed his brow. "Even if you have crippled hundreds of years of his foundation, how did you save his life when his small universe was about to rupture?" Many things can be done in a frozen spacetime. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59-17, Prepare to set off again. The cost was undoubtedly high, but for those who wished to remain among the living, it was nothing. After Wang Chang, 2 more people failed to advance, and Yang Kai stepped in to save their lives one after another. Fortunately, while the other 3 encountered some obstacles in their breakthrough, they all safely advanced in the end. At this point, a total of 20 out of the initial 23 had successfully broken through to the Ninth Order, which meant that the human race had seen the birth of 20 new Ninth Order masters in one go. Including Yang Kai and the others, there were now 30 Ninth Order masters among their ranks. This number was still not comparable to the human race at their peak, but it was a good start. The Grand Army was now resting as almost everyone had injuries to recover from. Conquering the no-return pass was only the beginning. In their original plans, the next step would be a crusade against the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction. The human race had suffered a crushing defeat outside the primordial heaven's source Grand Restriction before, resulting in countless deaths and the eventual invasion of the 3,000 worlds. Nobody wanted to experience that failure again. Even after that defeat, the humans had the strength to fight on. But now, the human race had gathered all their strength. If they were to lose this time, they were likely to be doomed to extinction. However, even the best-laid plans could never keep up with reality. The appearance of the Black Ink clan's reinforcements disrupted the original strategy. Before they could embark on their crusade to the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction, an elite Black Ink clan army of 10 million had to be disposed of. Without breaking through this obstacle, there was no point in thinking about a crusade to the Grand Restriction. The only good news was that the reinforcements had emerged from the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction, and a lifetime of isolation left them with very limited knowledge of the current situation of the human race. They did not know about the existence of the Void Guard, nor were they aware that their movements were being monitored by the humans, something which could be exploited. Yang Kai and Mi Jingluan held several discussions and finally came up with a feasible plan. While the Grand Army was recuperating, some confidential items were rapidly being developed, consuming a massive amount of resources. Half a year after the humans conquered the No-Return Pass, Pure Yang Pass, inside the main conference hall, the Ninth Order Masters were gathered. In front of the 29th Order Masters who had only just broken through after the last war, people like Yang Kai were already considered veterans. Everyone couldn't help but lament how the newcomers were replacing the old members, and the back waves of the river were pushing the front waves on. A total of 30 people were gathered here. It had been thousands of years since the humans had seen such a luxurious lineup. After half a year, the new Ninth Order Masters had just barely stabilized their cultivation. Though they have yet to fully consolidate their newfound strength, there was simply no time to let them slowly adjust their conditions. After the last battle, they had taken a full half-year to recover, which was a luxury for the current human race. Mi Jingluan raised his hand, and jade slips flew out to everyone one by one. As they examined these slips, Mi Jingluan spoke. After that major battle half a year ago, the Void Guard scouting ahead reported that the reinforcements from the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction have stopped and are now waiting to ambush us when we set out. They are currently located around the junction of the Black Ink battlefield and the late Ancient Era battlefield, though much closer to the latter. Listening to his briefing, the Ninth Order Masters checked the jade slips and found this basic information was listed inside. Mi Jingluan continued, "From the intelligence we have now, the Black Ink clan reinforcements have found out about the war here at the No-Return Pass as well as the outcome of the battle. That's why they are lying in wait for our army to fall into their trap ourselves. This is good news. Since they have no idea that their actions have already been exposed, we can use their plan against them. Since they have chosen to ambush us, we can take advantage of their inaction to surround them and wipe them out in one fell swoop. If we are to go against the Black Ink clan at the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction, these reinforcements must be eliminated first. While you were all recovering from your injuries, Junior Brother Yang and I have formulated a plan. Please look it over. If there are any issues, please speak up as soon as possible so that we can discuss and solve them together." The group silently looked through the jade slips. The newly advanced Ninth Order Masters remained silent, not because they felt that they lacked the qualifications to express their opinions, but because they felt that the plan was indeed feasible and there was nothing that had to be changed. They knew that while they were recovering and stabilizing their cultivation in retreat, Yang Kai and Mi Jingluan were still working hard. Xiaofan on the other hand asked, "Other than the fact that they have no true royal lords among their ranks, the number of masters they have is not inferior to the No-Return Pass when it was at its peak. Can we confirm there are no true royal lords among them?" Mi Jingluan looked at Yang Kai. Junior Brother Yang personally went to investigate and can confirm this. Of course, we will survey the area again to ensure that our intelligence is correct before we begin our operation. Xiaofan nodded lightly, "Then there's no problem." Even though the forces of this reinforcement army were not much different in terms of strength from the forces the Black Ink clan had during their peak at the No-Return Pass, the situation they were facing now was quite different. At the very least, these reinforcements did not have any true royal lords or black ink giant spirit gods among them. Meanwhile, the humans had not only gained 20 more Ninth Order Masters, but they also had the support of Ada and Aer. The advantages brought by the two giant spirit gods alone were immeasurable. Furthermore, there was a big difference between trying to siege a fortified position and conducting a field battle. Even if they had to face an army of millions of elites, the humans were confident that they could defeat the Black Ink clan with minimal losses as long as careful preparations were made. Since there are no issues, let's proceed according to plan. We have been preparing for this battle for the past 6 months, so all armies should be ready to depart in 3 days. All the Ninth Order Masters stood up to answer before dispersing. After capturing the no-return pass half a year ago, the new Ninth Order Masters were divided among the various armies. Ultimately, it was decided to keep the configuration of the 12 armies, so each army now had 2 or 3 Ninth Order Masters assuming command, avoiding the awkward situation of anyone lacking a Ninth Order Master. Once everyone left, Mi Jingluan turned to Yang Kai and asked, "Junior brother, how are your injuries?" Yang Kai replied, "Nothing to be concerned about, but I won't be able to use my dragon vein powers for a short period." The drawbacks of using his dragon bead could not be restored quickly. It would have to take at least a decade of uninterrupted rest for him to properly recover, something the humans could not afford right now. Mi Jingluan nodded, "We still need junior brother to work hard in the coming battles." "I know, it is my duty." Yang Kai nodded and stood up. "If senior brother has no other orders, I will go and cultivate now." Mi Jingluan laughed, "Go ahead." As soon as Yang Kai left the main hall, a face appeared in the void that blocked out the sky, revealing an ingratiating smile. Yang Kai was speechless and threw a world bead to Ada as he told him, "Eat less and don't fall asleep. We're going into battle soon." While chewing loudly on the world bead, Ada answered him casually. Not long after, the space-time river appeared outside of the no-return pass. Plunging inside, Yang Kai began refining resources and cultivating. Time waited for no one, and Yang Kai was now using every moment he could to improve his heritage, trying to reach the peak of the Ninth Order as soon as possible. After teaming up with Ada to slay a Black Ink giant spirit god last time, Yang Kai realized that he was still too weak. The Black Ink giant spirit god was only one of Mo's creations, a mere soul clone. If he had to face Mo someday, what would he do? Open Heaven Realm Masters were undoubtedly no match for Mo. According to Tsang, Mo had already reached the legendary creation realm. However, with Yang Kai's increasing progress and enlightenment in his Grand Daos, in recent years, he faintly felt that something was off about the belief that Mo was in the creation realm. Of course, he had no idea what exactly the creation realm was, but he knew that he needed to cultivate hard to bring his own cultivation to its peak before he could gain the qualifications to explore the mysteries of the next realm. He was still lacking in many ways. Every moment of free time was extremely precious for Yang Kai in the current situation. 3 days passed in a flash. Outside Pure Yang Pass, the Grand Army were fully armed and ready to go. The mood was solemn, and killing intent filled the air. After preparing for half a year, the soldiers had still not lost their momentum or fighting spirit. All of them knew that taking the no-return pass was only the beginning, and winning a single battle did not mean the end of the war. Only when the human race conquered the primordial heaven source grand restriction and vanquished Mo could they truly call themselves victorious. In this situation, letting their guard down in any way would mean death. 12 universe fragments had already been prepared and lay across the outside of the no-return pass. These universe fragments were recently moved back from the depths of the void by the humans, and each one corresponded to an army. At a certain moment, following the commands of the army commanders, the soldiers gathered on these universe fragments. "Junior brother, it's up to you now." Inside the no-return pass, Mi Jingluan turned his head and said to Yang Kai. Yang Kai nodded and took a step forward, arriving at the closest universe fragment. Summoning his spacetime river, Yang Kai quickly turned it into a torrent which wrapped around the universe fragment in front of him. Looking from afar, the surging river was just like a giant snake, coiling and enveloping the universe fragment. Dao strength surged, and with the shaking of the spacetime river, a section of the void was stripped away and compressed while the universe fragment within shrank rapidly. In less than an hour, Yang Kai retrieved the river and reached out, grabbing a newly formed world bead. After a quick investigation, he tossed it to Xiaofan, who was standing next to him. Even Xiaofan, who was used to seeing the strong winds and waves, caught it in a panic as he cradled the world bead in his palms. There was no helping this as the entire Blood Flame army was currently inside this world bead. Heavens know what damage it would cause to the army if the bead was to shatter. At this moment, Xiaofan could only sigh and marvel at the profundity of space secret techniques. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59-18, Turtle Hiding in Its Shell. In response to Xiaofan's question, Yang Kai explained, "This technique requires a suitable vessel, so it wasn't possible for me to do so at the time. A universe fragment or universe world that had been refined into a world bead was one such suitable vessel. The Black Ink clan had destroyed essentially all suitable bodies in the 3,000 worlds during their many millennia of occupation, so they were unsuitable for him to use in such a situation. He did have a few world beads from the myriad monsters' territory, but those were meant as rations for Ada and Air." Xiaofan nodded in understanding as he carefully put away the world bead that contained the entire Blood Flame army. Yang Kai was already refining the second one and soon turned the various universe fragments, each with one of the 12 armies on it, into world beads and gave them to the appropriate Ninth Order masters for safekeeping. Finally, Pure Yang Pass was the only object remaining outside the no-return pass. The Supreme Headquarters staff gathered in the central square with the two giant spirit gods who shrank themselves down. Once Yang Kai used his spacetime river to envelope and refine Pure Yang Pass into a type of world bead, all that was left of the Grand Army was a group of Ninth Order masters. Mi Jingluan turned around and gazed in the direction of the no-return pass as he called out, "Those of you who remain in the no-return pass must do your best to safeguard the entrance to the 3,000 worlds. If the army returns one day, it will be in glorious triumph. If, however," he paused, "if you receive unfavorable news from the front lines, seal the territory gate, return to the 3,000 worlds, and make the necessary preparations." Though the majority of the army was setting out, there were still some who remained at the no-return pass to stand guard. After all, this was the primary territory gate that led to the 3,000 worlds. They could not leave it undefended. Nevertheless, the ones who stayed back were the ones who had been severely injured during the previous battle. Every single one of them sported grave injuries, from severed limbs to damaged small universes. There were only a few tens of thousands of them. When Mi Jingluan gave the order for them to remain at the no-return pass, their protests made it all the way to the Supreme Headquarters. Despite their injuries, they were still fueled by their desire to slaughter the enemy, and even though they were not as strong as they once were, they were willing to fight to the bitter end. Mi Jingluan had to spend a lot of time persuading them with both reason and emotion until they finally agreed to watch over the territory gate. It was always wise to plan for all possibilities. Although they were able to kill off seemingly all of the Black Ink clan army when they besieged the no-return pass, there were bound to be some who managed to slip past them due to the vastness of the battlefield. While these remnants of the Black Ink clan army might not be all that powerful, they could still wreak havoc on the humans who remained behind in the 3,000 worlds if they were given free rein. Furthermore, the ones who stayed behind were not all powerful masters. It was for this very reason that Yang Kai left behind a sealing secret technique. If the humans fell in the coming battle, the ones who remained at the no-return pass were to retreat and use the sealing secret technique he left to permanently close the territory gate. Once that was done, the 3,000 worlds would no longer be connected to the Black Ink battlefield. Only a very large number of pseudo-royal lords or royal lords would be able to break the sealing secret technique Yang Kai left behind. If that many powerful masters from the Black Ink clan did return to the no-return pass, it meant that the human army had lost, which would also mean the end of the human race. Once Mi Jingluan finished giving his instructions, those who were to remain behind cupped their fists and chorused, "Yes, sir." The Ninth Order masters took one last look at the no-return pass. Their eyes flitted over the territory gate that led back to the 3,000 worlds before they hardened their hearts and abandoned all wistfulness as they headed deeper into the void. No one knew how many of them would make it back alive. Behind them, a loud voice bellowed out from the no-return pass, "May your valiant efforts be rewarded and your return victorious." The other voices rang out in unison, "May your valiant efforts be rewarded and your return victorious." With the help of the universe temples and space arrays that the Void Guard had set up beforehand, the 39th Order Masters took only a few days to traverse across the vast void and arrive at the boundary between the Black Ink battlefield and the late Ancient Era battlefield. They had made their calculations beforehand and gathered at the last of the universe temples where they convened with the Void Guard who were standing guard here. They wanted to hear the reports regarding the situation further ahead. Soon, the Void Guard finished reporting everything they knew. After taking it all in, Yang Kai said, "That means the Black Ink clan's reinforcements plan on ambushing us on the late Ancient Era battlefield." The Void Guard who spoke nodded and added, "That seems to be their plan." During the final battle at the no-return pass half a year ago, the reinforcement army that had been rushing over suddenly stopped. We didn't know what happened at the time, but later on, we figured that they must have received word from the no-return pass. Mi Jingluan nodded. Before Mo Na Yi died, he was still busy sending out dispatches. He must have been the one who arranged this. After Yang Kai killed Mo Na Yi with his spear, Mi Jingluan retrieved a small black ink nest from Mo Na Yi's hand. It was clear that the latter had been using the power of the black ink nest to send messages to the reinforcements. It's all clear now. The Black Ink clan's reinforcements realized that their existence had been exposed and that the no-return pass had been seized, so in compliance with Mo Na Yi's arrangements, they found a suitable battlefield to lay in wait to attack us, but they would not have expected us to arrive this quickly. Considering the pace of a regular army, it would take the humans about a decade to cross such a distance, even if they left as soon as they emerged victorious at the no-return pass. By then, no matter how strong the human race Grand Army was, they would still be exhausted from traveling and caught off guard by the Black Ink clan's well-prepared ambush. However, the human race only spent half a year recuperating after taking back the no-return pass before reaching this place a couple of days later. It had indeed been a wise decision to form the Void Guard as they managed to help the humans avoid a catastrophic situation. This was their chance to make use of the intel they had while their opponents remained in the dark. After mulling it over in silence, Yang Kai raised his head and said, "Senior brother, all of you can rest here for now. I'll go on ahead and scout the situation." Mi Jingluan nodded, "We will have to trouble you with that, junior brother." A Void Guard swiftly stepped forward with a space beacon which Yang Kai took and channeled his power into. Once the space beacon flashed, Yang Kai disappeared. The next instant, he appeared somewhere in the void. There was a figure beside him. It was Li Wuyi, who was in charge of tracking the movements of the Black Ink clan reinforcements. This was the same way Yang Kai dropped in on Li Wuyi the last time. Li Wuyi let out a small exhale of relief when he spotted Yang Kai. He did feel rather pressured by his task of keeping an eye on things alone, but thanks to Yang Kai's presence, he now felt as if some weight had been lifted off his shoulders. "Did we retake the no-return pass?" Li Wuyi asked. Even though Li Wuyi received the news about the results of the battle at the no-return pass, he could not resist checking anyway. "Indeed." Yang Kai nodded. That's good to hear. Li Wuyi smiled at the confirmation, but soon, his expression turned grim as he asked quietly, the casualties? Not as bad as it could have been. It is still bearable for us. Li Wuyi nodded without asking any further. All he would get was a cold, emotionless number, but every single number represented the sacrifice of a person. The price of war was far too heavy. How are things over there? Yang Kai looked out in front of him, but to his puzzlement, he did not see any sign of the Black Ink clan's reinforcements. I knew you were coming, so I retreated a little to avoid letting them sense anything. You can't see them from here. Li Wuyi explained. They stopped moving half a year ago. Since then, they've been preparing themselves and building defensive structures. Defensive structures? Yang Kai raised his eyebrows in surprise. Li Wuyi nodded. They dragged over many of the lifeless universe worlds and fragments to act as barriers. It seems to me that they intend to build up a base. It sounds as if they plan on having a full-on confrontation with us instead of ambushing us, Yang Kai thoughtfully mused. That's very much within their means. Li Wuyi's expression was grim. There were several hundred pseudo-royal lords and over 10 million high-rank or higher Black Ink clansmen. Even though they don't have any true royal lords or Black Ink giant spirit gods with them, they are still a force to be reckoned with. It's undoubtedly Mo Na Ye's doing, Yang Kai remarked in realization. Their goal was never to stop our crusade, they simply hope to weaken us. As long as we've been weakened enough, continuing with the crusade will become meaningless. Thus, instead of trying to set up an ambush, they are better off fighting an all-out battle. They probably want us to discover their tracks. Li Wuyi gave it some thought before nodding in agreement. That seems to be the case. How vigilant are they? Yang Kai checked. Only somewhat, I'd say, Li Wuyi replied. They don't seem to expect us to arrive anytime soon, so they haven't sent out scouts or set up any strict patrols. Furthermore, the scouts they have deployed are only monitoring a small area. Still, it's enough to stop me from getting too close. 6 months ago, Li Wuyi had been able to observe the Black Ink clan army from up close, but ever since they began setting up their base, he had to stay further back to avoid detection. I'll go and take a look, Yang Kai said. After confirming the direction, he shot off into the void. Though he did not discover any true royal lords the last time he checked, there was no harm in being cautious. It was best to do a thorough check once more, as inaccurate information could very well lead to unnecessary casualties in battle. After traveling for a while, Yang Kai caught sight of the Black Ink clan army. He used Thunder Shadow's innate divine ability to mask his figure and aura as he continued making his approach. It was just as Li Wuyi had said. The Black Ink clan army was building a base here. They dragged many universe worlds and fragments from all over the void to create barriers and barricades in an otherwise empty territory. This area was still a part of the Late Ancient Era battlefield. During the Late Ancient Era, the humans and the Black Ink clan fought fiercely on this vast expanse. Countless great experts died in battle, leaving behind numerous traps in the form of barriers, seals, and restrictions. There were even divine abilities and secret techniques that had yet to be used up. These were all things that the Black Ink clan could use to their advantage. They had no way of knowing the outcome of the battle, as they stopped receiving updates from the no-return pass after the royal lord named Mo Na Ye transmitted some final information to them. Nevertheless, they could hazard a guess that the Black Ink clan at the no-return pass must have met their doom and all the Black Ink nests were destroyed. If that was not the case, it was impossible for them to not get any further news. Initially, they stormed out of the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction to help the Black Ink clan army at the no-return pass, but now that the humans had captured it, was there any point in heading over as reinforcements? In the end, they chose to follow Mo Na Ye's directions. They remained in place to await the arrival of the human race army with the intent to block their path. The human race army was so powerful that they could even slaughter a soul clone of the Supreme One. Thus, the reinforcements knew they would surely lose any war they fought against them, but they had no choice. Fortunately, they were quite a distance away from the no-return pass and thus had sufficient time to prepare for the confrontation. Just as the pseudo-royal lords were in the middle of their discussion though, a feudal lord flew over and stood by the side as he greeted them. "What is it?" A pseudo-royal lord that looked like a giant spider turned to him and asked. It was an extremely peculiar sight as the spider-like pseudo-royal lord had a human face. However, the Black Ink clan came in all manner of strange and peculiar forms, so he was not unique by any means. "I have something to report, sirs," the feudal lord respectfully said. "Go on." It was a pseudo-royal lord who looked like a small giant with 4 arms who spoke this time. The feudal lord swiftly reported his findings. It did not count as anything serious. Technically, Pyongyang Pass was many times smaller than even a single universe fragment, but when the two met, it was the universe fragments that exploded into pieces. It looked as if someone used a hammer on a watermelon. The sudden, forceful attack turned the first universe fragment into shattered pieces, and the Black Ink clansmen atop it were thrown into chaos. The unlucky ones were killed upon impact, but most of them were stumbling around and coughing up blood as they had been heavily injured in the collision. Only those who were at least a feudal lord could survive the fallout of such a collision. At least 100,000 high-rank Black Ink clan soldiers died from just this attack alone, and it was only the beginning. Without the humans to wield the strength of Pyongyang Pass to its maximum, it was simply an inanimate object that could not do much. However, just as Pyongyang Pass smashed that universe fragment to pieces, 2 figures shot up and swiftly expanded. They instantly turned into giant silhouettes that flanked the great pass on either side. The immense pressure that emanated from the enormous figures made the Black Ink clan feel as if their souls were shaking and chills ran down their spines. Giant spirit gods. Terror-stricken screams rang out from all directions. None of them expected to see a giant spirit god suddenly appear amidst their ranks, let alone 2. Pyongyang Pass, which was supposed to be back at the no-return pass, had shown up here, and 2 giant spirit gods came with it. The pseudo-royal lords could not fathom how the humans managed to cross such a vast distance in such a short amount of time, or how they managed to ensure that the Black Ink clan was completely blindsided by this sudden, fearsome attack. Martial Peak, Chapter 59-20, in full force. Secret techniques shot out at the 2 giant spirit gods from all directions as the Black Ink clan reacted instinctively while in panic. Thus, Ada and Air had only just resumed their original forms, but they were already under fierce attack. Ada roared as fury colored his simple, honest face. Ada didn't do anything. Ada just showed up here, but everyone is attacking Ada. Ada knew the Black Ink clan was bad. His roar seemed to form an invisible wall that blocked all the secret techniques from the Black Ink clan, and in the very next moment, he stepped towards them. Though his massive size made his movement seem rather clumsy, 1 step was all it took for him to reach the nearest universe fragment where he threw out his fist. Ada was much bigger than Pyongyang Pass, almost the same size as the universe fragment in front of him, so when his fist struck, the Black Ink clansmen who were hit directly instantly vaporized, regardless of how powerful they were. There had even been a pseudo-royal lord present, yet he did not manage to escape this fate. Pseudo-royal lords were undeniably strong, but they were still ants compared to a giant spirit god's fist. Countless others died as well. Ada's blow created a huge crater initially, and as the force of his punch reverberated out, the entire universe fragment soon exploded into dust. The Black Ink clansmen cried out as they tried to escape, but they were still affected by the shockwave of Ada's punch and were now either heavily injured or at least dazed, making their struggles almost futile. An 8th Order Master could destroy a universe fragment with a single punch, but there was still an enormous difference in destructive force when compared to a giant spirit god. This was the strength of a giant spirit god. Right now, apart from Mo, whose power remained enigmatic to all, the giant spirit god clan were the most powerful beings fighting in this war. Although they were not proficient in the use of secret techniques or divine abilities, and seemed to be of lower sentience in some ways, they had immense strength. While Ada was busy destroying that universe fragment, Aer did not stand around idle either. He charged at the defensive barrier the Black Ink clan had worked so hard to create, and with each kick or punch he landed, lands were destroyed and countless Black Ink clan soldiers died. In just a few breaths of time, the void was littered with broken universe fragments and Black Ink strength that had leaked out of the dead Black Ink clan soldiers. It was only then that the pseudo-royal lords managed to recover themselves and take action, ordering their armies to try and stop the two giant spirit gods. Soon, their attack started taking effect. Although giant spirit gods were terrifyingly powerful, there were only 2 of them and their enormous size made them easy targets. The Black Ink clan reinforcements numbered over 10 million, and as long as they properly coordinated, their combined strength could not be underestimated. The attacks poured in from all directions. Ada and Aer's silhouettes began to look a little unsteady and they could not move as freely either, but that only served to infuriate them even more. When the human race army attacked the no-return pass, they were able to kill the second Black Ink giant spirit god by gathering all their strength together. The Black Ink clan would probably be able to accomplish the same feat if they could group up and arrange themselves the way the humans had. Though it had to be said that the Black Ink giant spirit god the humans killed had already been through an intense battle with Ada and Aer, and thus was already seriously injured. Furthermore, its movement had been restricted as well and it could not dodge the combined assault from the human race army. Even a Black Ink giant spirit god could not withstand that level of bombardment. According to the information Mo Nayi provided before his death, the river was made out of Dao strengths and belonged to Yang Kai, the Killing Star. He was the most powerful 9th Order Master and the one that Mo Nayi warned them to guard against, for he was an even bigger threat to the Black Ink clan than the giant spirit gods. When the pseudo-royal lords in the reinforcement army heard this report, they found it hard to believe that a lone human, no matter how strong, would pose an even bigger threat to the Black Ink clan than the giant spirit gods. Nevertheless, Mo Nayi was a true royal lord and they had to pay serious attention to the last warning he gave them just before he died. It was only now that the pseudo-royal lords realized Mo Nayi could have been right. Though the giant spirit gods were powerful, they were extremely overt in the way they did things. It was much easier to guard against a spear in the light than an arrow in the dark. As soon as that pseudo-royal lord's roar rang out, it was followed by an agonizing shriek. The Black Ink clan were drawn by his cries and quickly looked over, only to find a silhouette fading away behind the pseudo-royal lord who was now sporting a large hole in his chest. Dao strengths surged from his wound and ate away at his vitality. "Don't let him escape!" A pseudo-royal lord yelled as he unleashed his aura and smashed it towards that part of the void. Many pseudo-royal lords jumped into action and followed suit. Space rippled and a silhouette which was about to completely fade away reappeared once more. It was a human who had a long spear in his hand. He looked perfectly at ease despite being surrounded by his enemies. "You've got pretty quick reflexes," the human coolly remarked, but the pseudo-royal lords did not hear any semblance of a complimentary tone in his voice. "Quick! Keep him occupied." The pseudo-royal lord who shouted earlier was smarter than the others and knew that this was a rare opportunity for them. If they allowed Yang Kai to hide once more, even more of their masters would meet their doom. Their best option now was to pin him down and stop him from finding a chance to sneak up on any other pseudo-royal lords. The pseudo-royal lords nearest to Yang Kai swiftly lunged at him from their respective directions, trying to gang up on him. They attacked as speedily as they could in an impressive display of cooperation for the frantic state they were in. If it had been any other Ninth Order master, they would have been caught in a difficult battle. However, Yang Kai's expression remained indifferent as he made a grabbing motion and Dao strengths rippled in the air as the sound of water echoed. He summoned his space-time river, and it snaked around him like a whip. The pseudo-royal lords who were charging at him were taken by surprise and ended up plunging into the river, just like children who drowned by a sudden surge of water. They struggled on the surface of the river for a few moments before sinking in and disappearing. The river grew fierce as Dao's strength surged. A few figures could vaguely be seen inside the river, clearly fighting for their lives. Soon, the commotion died down. Yang Kai flicked his wrist and a few figures flew out of the river. When the Black Ink clan saw this, their hearts sank and their expressions hardened. The figures that fell out were the pseudo-royal lords who had been swept up just now, but they were all now covered in mortal wounds and their auras had vanished. All it took was a few moments and all those pseudo-royal lords had been killed. It was an unbelievable display of power. The pseudo-royal lords who were still charging towards Yang Kai immediately halted, thanking the Supreme One for being further away as they had not been dragged into the strange river. Otherwise, they would have numbered among the dead pseudo-royal lords as well. All of the pseudo-royal lords began to hesitate. Nevertheless, Yang Kai soon reappeared behind the pseudo-royal lord who had given the command, his long spear casually piercing through the latter's head. The pseudo-royal lord had been secretly searching for Yang Kai's location all along, but he did not expect the human to be arrogant enough to show up in this manner, so he was caught off guard. By the time he was able to react, Yang Kai's hand had flashed out and tightly gripped his forehead. The pseudo-royal lord was entirely shocked by what happened next. All at once, he felt as if his entire body was mysteriously suppressed and sealed by a strange force. Despite merely being held by the forehead, he could not fight back at all and Yang Kai ended up whisking him off just like that. All the masters from the Black Ink clan nearby gasped in shock and fury as they sent forth a torrent of secret techniques aimed at Yang Kai. Nevertheless, their attacks hit nothing as Yang Kai's silhouette flickered across the battlefield without ever truly solidifying in one spot. Yang Kai flitted around to avoid the Black Ink clan's attacks, all the while holding onto the pseudo-royal lord by the latter's forehead. He eyed the pseudo-royal lord and stated matter-of-factly, "The humans have a saying, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all. You'll have to pay the price for not watching your tongue." Alas, the pseudo-royal lord was a rebellious fellow, so despite being subjugated, he had no intention of compromising. He sneered and screeched, "What price would you make me pay, huh? It's just death. So what if you kill me? You'll never be able to stand against the Supreme One. Black Ink is eternal. Who said I'm going to kill you?" Yang Kai eyed him coolly. The pseudo-royal lord abruptly felt a thick malice engulf him, one so intense that even though he was fully prepared to die, he could not help shuddering in response. "You just came out of the primordial heaven source grand restriction, so I'm assuming you've never experienced purifying light before. Well, I'm in a generous mood today, so I'll help you broaden your horizons." Having said that, the two marks on Yang Kai's hand became visible, and in the very next moment, yellow and blue light flowed out and wrapped around the pseudo-royal lord. The pseudo-royal lord immediately had a look of horror on his face. It was true that the reinforcement army had only just recently left the primordial heaven source grand restriction and had never encountered purifying light before, but they had heard of it and how it could be used to counter Black Ink's strength. Black Ink's strength was able to corrupt anything and everything it touched, but the heavens were fair in all things, so no matter how strong a particular energy was, there was always something that countered it. Primordial light and darkness were both born at the dawn of the universe. Neither could exist without the other, but both also perfectly suppressed one another. The yellow and blue lights swirled together and quickly condensed into a pure white light. A sizzling sound was heard, and all at once, the pseudo-royal lord felt as if he had been tossed into a boiling pot of oil as Black Ink's strength gushed out of his body and evaporated as it came into contact with the purifying light. Throughout this process, the pseudo-royal lord underwent such overwhelming pain that he could not stop screaming in agony. His tormented cries echoed across the battlefield and struck fear into the hearts of all the Black Ink clansmen. The attacks on Yang Kai did not cease as the Black Ink clan continued their attempts to track him down, unleashing all their most powerful attacks wherever they suspected he might be. However, it made no difference. While Yang Kai could not hide himself while torturing the pseudo-royal lord, his masterful use of space principles allowed him to freely weave around the Black Ink clan's attacks. In fact, thanks to Yang Kai's sneak maneuvering, a sizable number of masters from the Black Ink clan ended up getting caught in friendly fire instead. As for the pseudo-royal lord that Yang Kai captured, he had nearly screamed himself hoarse as his aura continuously weakened. In the end, he could not take it anymore and growled hoarsely, "Kill me! Kill me!" He finally realized that there were fates worse than death. Yang Kai carefully adjusted the strength of purifying light and brought the pseudo-royal lord before him. "Killing you is no problem at all," he quietly said, "just tell me what's happening at the primordial heaven source grand restriction and you won't have to suffer this torment any longer." The pseudo-royal lord's lips quivered as he howled through his pain, "The human race army has been wiped out and the Supreme One has woken up." Yang Kai's gaze turned cold. "Kill me. I told you what you wanted to know," the pseudo-royal lord roared hoarsely. "But, what you told me differs from what I know. I'm telling you the truth. It's all true." Yang Kai did not answer. Regardless of whether or not the suppressing Black Ink army was still alive, there was no doubt that Mo had not awakened yet. If Mo was fully awake, the primordial heaven source grand restriction would have been shattered and the reinforcements sent out would have been many times larger and had true royal lords leading them. Even at a time like this pseudo-royal lord still wants to try and trick me, huh? Either he doesn't know what's happening over there, or he doesn't wish to tell me. Yang Kai sighed. He knew there was no hope of him extracting any useful information about the situation over there out of the Black Ink clan now. The reinforcements had chosen to remain in this place to put up a fight against the human race army after hearing about the situation at the no-return pass. Thus, it was most likely that they were already prepared to die, so it was unrealistic to think he could dig out any information from them. That pseudo-royal lord was still bathing in purifying light and his aura had now dropped precipitously. Even the aura of a high-rank Black Ink clan was stronger than his now, so Yang Kai tossed him at the group of pseudo-royal lords who were swarming over as a barrage of attacks shot out at him. As the attacks exploded, the pseudo-royal lord turned into dust. Once Yang Kai's hand was free, he immediately turned around and summoned the space-time river which came crashing down on those who were chasing after him. The long river was like a beast that devoured everything in its path as it swallowed up a group of pseudo-royal lords. Dao strengths then surged and wiped out their vitality. Meanwhile, a group of pseudo-royal lords were standing on a certain universe fragment. They did not join the hunt against Yang Kai and instead gathered in the distance to observe the situation. After seeing the way a single human and two giant spirit gods sent their entire army into upheaval, the pseudo-royal lord in command let out a long sigh before saying, "We can't lose all our forces here. Our mission is to cripple the human race army. There's no point trying to put up a fight against these three. Based on the current strength of the Black Ink clan army, it was impossible for them to kill the two giant spirit gods. Certainly they could injure these two giant spirit gods, but once the latter felt threatened, they would simply run away and the Black Ink clan had absolutely no way to stop them. The same applied to Yang Kai, the Killing Star. Since the Black Ink clan had no way of stopping their three opponents from escaping, and no way of killing them, this was an entirely futile fight that would only result in casualties on their side. The other pseudo-royal lords nodded in agreement. Give the order for some to stay behind and keep these three occupied, as for the others, evacuate at once. The pseudo-royal lord quickly came to a decision. Where should we go? A pseudo-royal lord asked. The one who first spoke stayed silent for a moment before looking in the direction of the no-return pass. We'll go out and meet the human race army ourselves. At first, the rest were confused, but they soon came to a realization. This was probably their only option now. They had to clash with the human race army as soon as possible, that way, even if they all died, they would still manage to fulfill their mission. Marshall Peak, Chapter 59-22, The Purple Feather Army Charges. The order to withdraw went out at once, and despite the chaos of the situation, the Black Ink clan army was able to maintain some semblance of order as they prepared to retreat. According to their estimates, they had to leave at least 30% of their forces behind to keep the two giant spirit gods and the Killing Star occupied. That was the only way they could carve out enough room for the rest of the army to leave safely and carry out their mission. This decision pained the majority of them, but they had no choice. The pseudo-royal lord who served as the commander was standing atop a universe fragment and surveying the bloody battlefield with an icy glare. Though he knew he would never get to seek vengeance himself, he still wanted to sear the Killing Star's image into the recesses of his mind. Sir. Suddenly, a feudal lord flew over and landed in front of the pseudo-royal lords to frantically report, "Sirs, we have found signs of a human race army." The pseudo-royal lords were startled. Which direction? The commanding pseudo-royal lord quickly asked. That direction, the feudal lord pointed it out. The pseudo-royal lords all turned to look, and sure enough, they spotted hazy figures far off in the depths of the void. It was a great distance away, so they could not see clearly, but it was undoubtedly a human race army, a very large one. Excellent! The pseudo-royal lord cheered thunderously. He did not seem panicked by the sudden report, instead, he looked pleased. Regardless of how the human race army managed to arrive in such a short amount of time when it should have taken them over a decade to reach this place, it was precisely what the Black Ink clan hoped to see. When they left the primordial heaven source Grand Restriction, their initial mission was to aid the Black Ink clan army at the no-return pass by attacking the humans from the rear. They wanted to sneak up on the enemy, catch the humans off guard, and slaughter them all. However, when the no-return pass was lost, their mission changed. All they needed to do now was to fight the humans who were heading for primordial heaven source Grand Restriction, and to stop at nothing whilst doing so. Neither the outcome nor their survival mattered. The sudden appearance of Yang Kai and the two giant spirit gods threw their initial plans into disarray, and they were forced to split their troops in two. They had to leave some behind to keep the three menaces occupied while the others headed for the no-return pass to confront the human race army as soon as possible. No one expected the human race army would be here already. The enemy was delivering themselves up, so after being startled for a moment, the Black Ink clansmen were filled up with a thirst for battle. The humans used the strength of their Killing Star and the two giant spirit gods to disrupt their position and deployments before sending in their army to launch a surprise attack. It looked as if the humans had planned all this from the start. It was perilous to face such an enemy on their terms. Still, what was there for them to fear? The Black Ink clan existed solely to sacrifice everything for the sake of the Supreme One. Sir! Yet another voice called out from the distance, and a second feudal lord joined them as he quickly reported, "Sirs, we have sighted a human race army." The pseudo-royal lord commander nodded, "I know." The feudal lord who just came was completely taken aback. He rushed over as soon as he received the news, so how did the pseudo-royal lords find out about it beforehand? Nevertheless, he dared not make any comments. He stood aside and glanced at the first feudal lord, but when their gazes met, they seemed to realize something. "Sir." Once again, a feudal lord rushed over from a different direction. At last, the pseudo-royal lords also realized that the situation was not as simple as they thought it was. The human race army was not coming from just one direction. Armies were rushing towards their base from all directions. They were completely surrounded. It was hard to imagine how the humans managed to achieve this. The Black Ink clan army numbered over 10 million elites, so it should have been impossible to box them in without someone noticing something earlier on. Finally, some of the pseudo-royal lords recalled the reports they had dismissed the past few days, ones about scouts and resource-gathering teams failing to return on time. From the looks of it now, the missing Black Ink clansmen must have been discovered by the humans and eliminated. They never thought that the humans could arrive here so soon, so they had been preparing for a battle to break out a decade later. That was why they were not more vigilant and failed to realize the humans were closing in on them. Those deplorable humans. The pseudo-royal lord commander exploded in rage. Even though he wanted to take on the human race armies as soon as possible, he did not welcome being plotted against this way. After thinking in silence for a moment though, he shouted, "Pass down the order, we launch a full-scale attack in that direction." He pointed in the direction of the no-return pass, which was also the direction the first feudal lord pointed out in his report. Although the Black Ink clan was being besieged from all directions, the one silver lining of the situation was that the human race's strength was scattered as they had split themselves up into over 10 different forces. Even though this allowed them to surround the Black Ink clan, it also meant that the Black Ink clan could target these smaller armies individually. As long as they moved quickly enough, they had enough heritage to wipe out a few of the human race's armies. That would be enough to deal a crushing blow to the humans and force them to cut their crusade short. The Black Ink clan were already making preparations to withdraw, so after receiving the latest order from the commanding pseudo-royal lord, they instantly split into two. 30% stayed behind to keep Yang Kai and the giant spirit orders occupied while the rest charged at the human race army that was approaching from the direction of the no-return pass. The human race army coming from that direction was the Purple Feather Army. Wuxia was originally the only Ninth Order master in the Purple Feather Army, but ever since the battle at the no-return pass, the humans had 20 new Ninth Order masters, 2 of whom were added to the Purple Feather Army. They were a man and a woman, an actual senior brother and junior sister pair. Even if one searched the entirety of the human race's history, it was exceedingly rare to find a precedent of 2 such people growing so powerful together. It was hard enough to become a Ninth Order master as few ever had the possibility of doing so. If it had not been for the benefits gained from the World Tree clone, it would usually take several thousand, if not tens of thousands of years for someone with the aptitude to become a Ninth Order master to appear in a great force. Thus, the years and generations that separated the Ninth Order masters made it near impossible for 2 to have a senior brother and junior sister relationship. That all changed with the appearance of the Star Boundary. After several millennia of fighting together, this pair could basically read each other's thoughts. Even when they were still 7th Order and 8th Order masters, they had already carved out a name for themselves on the battlefield as numerous feudal and territory lords had died at their hands. They had even caught Mo Na Ye's attention as he had set up traps that were targeted specifically at them. The many years of war between the human race and the Black Ink clan gave birth to a plethora of both celebratory and sorrowful stories, but it also led to the birth of many remarkable people, and these 2 were ranked among them. Right now, they were standing atop a purifying black ink battleship together with Wuxia, their senior, as all three were observing the battlefield. When Wuxia saw that the Black Ink clan army had chosen to charge in their direction, his eyes flashed with displeasure. Whether it was on purpose or not, the Purple Feather army had been singled out by the enemy as the weak point that they could easily run over. "Prepare for battle," Wuxia loudly commanded. The Purple Feather army that had been traveling at great speed instantly repositioned themselves. They did not take up a defensive formation, but rather an offensive one. Despite facing off against their opponents whose numbers were several times greater than their own, the Purple Feather army showed no fear. Every single one of them was able to stay composed as they waited for the moment to strike. After going through numerous battles, both large and small, throughout the past few millennia, they had built up their spirits through their continued victories and could move as one body. The Black Ink clan army was not about to face the weak army they believed it to be, but a giant beast who could swallow everything in its path. Murderous intent flared as the distance between the two armies rapidly shrank. All at once, multicolored flashes of light shot out from the Purple Feather army and rained down on the approaching Black Ink clan. At the same time, streaks of black secret techniques shot out from the Black Ink clan army towards the Purple Feather army. The fight had officially begun. Scores of auras from the Black Ink clan were extinguished by the bursts of light, and even the pseudo-royal lords could not let their guard down. They were completely focused on dodging the secret techniques. In a situation like this, even a minor slip-up could spell their doom. As for the Purple Feather army, though they suffered some losses as well, it was nothing compared to what the Black Ink clan suffered. It was not surprising as the human race had the protection of warships and spirit arrays, while the Black Ink clan did not. In a head-on battle between two armies where secret techniques and artifacts were exchanged at long range, the side with stronger defenses had far more of an advantage. It was akin to a mortal battle where both armies had archers but only one had shields. Naturally, the one with shields suffered far fewer casualties. In this case, the humans were the ones with the shields. Evidently, the Black Ink clan picked up on this as well. They had to withstand the constant decrease in their numbers as they tried to hasten their attacks. Since they lost out in terms of defense, they were forced to expend some of their energy to defend themselves in order to counter the humans' advantage. After a few rounds of secret techniques were exchanged, the fearsome armies finally clashed in the void. By numbers alone, the humans were certainly at a disadvantage, but they were still able to halt the Black Ink clan army's charge by force. The Purple Feather army seemed to turn into a massive boulder which could not be moved. No one knew how they did it, but they did. Black Ink clan bastards, suffer death. Wuxia's bellow rang out. He was still standing atop the purifying Black Ink battleship when he first started speaking, but by the time he finished, he had already charged into the Black Ink clan army. His weapon flashed as he cut down a pseudo-royal lord before the latter could even register what was happening. Black blood splattered everywhere as a powerful aura flared up before disappearing. Countless masters from the Black Ink clan shuddered in fear. Though the pseudo-royal lords were resolute in their determination to sacrifice everything for the Supreme One, they still felt chills down their spine when they saw how terrifying Wuxia was. Martial Peak, Chapter 59-23, Surrounded. Wuxia made a show of strength by channeling everything he had into the attack. A pseudo-royal lord who was caught off guard would never have been able to defend himself against it. Off to a good start. However, in the very next breath, Wuxia was surrounded by numerous masters from the Black Ink clan. After being momentarily stunned, they swiftly rushed over to gang up on him. Wuxia showed no fear as he slashed out around him. As Dao's strength rippled through the void, his formidable power burst out and turned his enemies into rivers of blood. The other human race masters followed in Wuqing's footsteps as they rushed into the enemy lines, including the two new Ninth Order masters. Their figures lunged forth as two flashes of light as they headed straight for the pseudo-royal lords. The junior sister's expression was grim as her hands swiftly moved to unleash a mysterious strength that filled the void, causing the pseudo-royal lords to instantly feel as though their souls were becoming unstable. They saw stars circling their heads as if they had been hit by an invisible hammer. The senior brother seized this chance to close in with his sword. Sword light shrouded his body as he cut through the pseudo-royal lords. Black blood splattered as one of the pseudo-royal lords was relieved of his head, while the others were heavily injured. This was all accomplished with a single strike. By the time the pseudo-royal lords who were lucky enough to survive could finally react, the senior brother's sword light was slashing down on them. Agonizing screams echoed across the battlefield. Of this senior brother and junior sister pair, one excelled in the Soul Dao while the other excelled in the Sword Dao. Furthermore, they were able to act as one as they fought on the battlefield, which meant they could kill their enemies even more efficiently than Wuqing, the veteran Ninth Order master. Meanwhile, the Eighth Order masters quickly got into their battle formations and challenged the remaining pseudo-royal lords, causing intense fights to break out in all directions. The battle was joined in an instant as the two armies fought with dogged fervor. In this battle, the human race were both advantaged and disadvantaged at the same time. One of the things working in their favor was that these pseudo-royal lords had a critical difference from the pseudo-royal lords from the No Return Pass. While they were all similarly powerful, they differed when it came to experience. The pseudo-royal lords from the No Return Pass had fought against the human race for hundreds of years at least, and with the help of the information they gleaned from Black Ink disciples, they were able to mimic the humans and even learn to form battle formations. Although they could only form a simple Three Fortunes formation, it would still require 20 to 30 Eighth Order masters in 5 elements or 6 paths formations to contain them. That was the reason why the humans had such a hard time during the battles at the No Return Pass. Even a simple Three Fortunes formation had given the pseudo-royal lords a huge boost in combat efficiency and allowed them to occupy many more human masters. However, that was not the case for the pseudo-royal lords who just came out of the primordial heaven's source grand restriction. They did not know how to form battle formations and their combat experience was quite lacking, so even though they worked together in certain situations, each of them basically acted independently, oftentimes getting in each other's way rather than providing support to one another. As soon as the clashing started, the Eighth Order masters keenly picked up on this and were thrilled. If the Eighth Order masters formed a 5 elements formation, they were just barely able to put up a fight against a pseudo-royal lord. These attacks would smash the masters from the Black Ink clan into pieces and many of the humans who had been caught in a perilous situation were saved. To the confusion of everyone, you're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.